Chapter 37 Sacrifices Made. The ocean stretched out before them, its surface still and serene, the calm water reflecting the early light of day in a peaceful embrace. It was a deceptive tranquility, one that masked the weight of what was to come. Beneath the surface, the abyssal trench lay in eerie silence, its once feared depths now a shadow of their former self. The dark, malevolent magic that had corrupted the trench for centuries had waned, but it had not been fully erased. The power that had bound the trench in darkness still lingered in its murky depths, a reminder that the battle was far from over. The weight of this knowledge hung heavily in the air, a tension palpable even in the stillness of the sea. Adrian and Serena stood at the water's edge, the impending ritual now looming before them, each knowing the gravity of what was about to unfold. The final ritual, the one that would determine the fate of the trench and all the magic that had once bound it, was upon them. The air was thick with anticipation, the currents seeming to pause in respect for the magnitude of the moment. Serena could feel the pulse of the magic in the water, the ancient power that had long been held in check, now stirring restlessly beneath her feet. Every breath she took felt heavy, laden with the knowledge that once this ritual was completed, there would be no turning back. The consequences of their actions, of breaking the curse, of releasing the forces they had yet to fully understand, would reshape everything. Yet despite the uncertainty that still loomed, there was a quiet resolve in both of them. They had come this far, and now, with the final steps ahead, they would face whatever came next together. Adrian and Serena stood at the edge of the reef, their feet firm against the rocky ground as the first light of dawn spilled over the horizon. At their feet lay the shattered remnants of the Heartstone, its fragments glowing faintly in the dim morning light, casting soft, ethereal shadows that seemed to dance across the wet stones. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, its surface calm and unassuming, as though unaware of the storm that had raged beneath it. The fragments, once a symbol of power and hope, now seemed fragile, delicate, as though they held the last threads of a life-or-death decision within their cracked surfaces. The weight of everything they had fought for pressed heavily on their shoulders. The ritual, which had already demanded so much from them, battles fought at great cost, allies lost along the way, and secrets that had been uncovered, tearing through their understanding of the world, had left them both drained. Yet despite the sacrifices they had made, they knew that the hardest part was yet to come. The air around them hummed with a quiet intensity, the silence amplifying the gravity of what they were about to attempt. Serena's heart pounded in her chest, a steady drum of anticipation, but also of fear of what might happen once the final steps of the ritual were taken. Everything had led to this moment, yet the enormity of their task, the potential consequences of what they might unleash or undo, weighed heavily on her mind. They had already proven their strength in the face of unimaginable trials, but now they were standing on the precipice of something far greater. Their bond, their combined magic, would either restore the balance of the reef or send it spiraling into an even darker chaos. As they looked at each other, the unspoken understanding between them was clear. Whatever the outcome, they would face it together. The Heartstone's shattered pieces lay at their feet, a symbol of both the end of one journey and the beginning of the next. The ritual had already cost them dearly, but the final act of reclaiming the magic of the reef would be the most demanding test of all. Adrian's gaze was unwavering as it rested on the Heartstone fragments scattered at his feet, their faint glow a reminder of the monumental task that lay ahead. His mind was clouded with the weight of what was to come, the ritual that would determine the fate of the reef, but at a cost neither of them could fully comprehend. The magic required was not enough to undo the darkness that had corrupted the waters. It demanded more. There was a price to be paid, a personal sacrifice that would bind the curse's end to the very essence of the one who gave it. This wasn't just a matter of power or will, but of something irreplaceable, something that would leave a permanent mark. Adrian had known this from the moment they had first set out on this perilous journey, but knowing it intellectually and facing it in the cold light of reality were two vastly different things. The sense of impending loss gripped him tightly, his heart heavy with the knowledge that whatever they had worked for, whatever they had suffered for, would come at a profound personal cost. As the early light of dawn cast long shadows across the reef, Adrian could feel the tension in the air, thick with the knowledge of the sacrifice that awaited. His chest tightened with the unspoken truth that, in the end, it would be he who had to give up what mattered most to him, something that could never be reclaimed. The fear of what that loss would mean for him, for Serena, and for their future together lingered like an invisible weight pressing on his soul. He had prepared himself for this moment, had accepted the inevitability of it long ago, but now that the time had arrived, the reality was far more crushing than he had imagined. It wasn't just the loss that terrified him, it was the uncertainty of how the ritual would unfold, of what exactly he would lose, and whether it would truly be enough to restore balance to the reef. As his hand brushed against the broken pieces of the heartstone, the magnitude of the sacrifice took root deep within him. This was the final test, the true price of their victory, and Adrian could only hope that it would be enough to restore what had been lost. Serena's voice was soft but heavy, the words carrying a depth of emotion that Adrian could feel even without looking at her. She stared down at the heartstone fragments, her eyes distant as she absorbed the full weight of their journey. Every step, every challenge, every sacrifice had led to this point, and yet now that the moment had arrived, the enormity of it felt even more daunting. Her expression was unreadable, as if she had already closed off the part of herself that might falter in the face of the impossible choice ahead. The quiet between them stretched, filled only by the soft crash of waves against the rocks, as though the very ocean was holding its breath. "We've come so far," she continued, her gaze still fixed on the shattered stone. "But we both knew it would come to this." There was no fear in her words, no regret, only an acceptance that had settled deep within her, forged in the fires of all they had endured together. Adrian glanced at her, his heart aching with the weight of the unspoken understanding between them. She was right, of course. From the very beginning, they had known that the final ritual would not be without sacrifice. It had been the only way to truly break the curse and restore balance to the reef, yet knowing it would happen and facing it were two entirely different things. As much as Serena's words were filled with a kind of quiet resolve, Adrian could see the subtle strain in her posture, the way her hands clenched around the edge of her cloak, as if holding on to whatever fleeting strength remained. She had carried her burden for so long, and now, with the ritual looming, it was time to pay the ultimate price. There was no turning back, no way to avoid the sacrifice. And though their hearts were heavy, both of them knew that this was the only way forward, the only way to ensure the darkness was gone for good. It was a cruel irony that their victory would come at the cost of something irreplaceable, but they would face it together, as they had always done. Adrian turned to Serena, his heart aching as he saw the unwavering determination in her eyes. It was the same fierce resolve that had carried them both through every battle, every trial they had faced together, but now it cut through him like a blade. The thought of her enduring a sacrifice, the very essence of herself, to end the curse left him breathless. He had always known that this final act would demand more than magic. It would demand everything. Yet the idea that she might offer up her own personal price, that she might take on the burden of this final step, gnawed at him. His voice came out hoarse, trembling with the weight of his feelings. "You don't have to do this, Serena," he said, his words barely a whisper against the sound of the waves crashing around them. "This is my fight. My sacrifice should be enough." The truth of it hit him hard. He had always known this was the price of their victory, but to see her ready to shoulder it alongside him felt like an unbearable burden. His gaze locked with hers, a silent plea for her to reconsider, to allow him to bear the cost alone. But in her eyes he saw the same acceptance, the same unspoken bond that had always drawn them together. It was more than just a shared mission, it was a deep, irrevocable connection. Adrian knew that Serena, like him, would never let the other carry such a weight alone. Yet the thought of her giving up something so irreplaceable, something she could never get back, twisted his heart. His chest tightened as he took a step toward her, reaching for her hand, the touch warm but full of desperation. He would not, could not, let her pay the price for both of them. But Serena, as always, was steadfast. She was determined to see this through, even if it meant sacrificing herself in the process. And though the ache in Adrian's heart only deepened, he understood that this moment, this decision, was one they would make together, whether he wanted it or not. Serena shook her head, her silver hair catching the first light of dawn, shimmering like the surface of the sea as it rippled in the breeze. Her gaze softened, but her voice remained firm, carrying an unwavering conviction that struck Adrian like a force of nature. "No, Adrian," she said, the words laced with a depth of understanding that only someone who had walked beside him through every trial could hold. "This isn't just about you or me." She paused, taking a slow breath, as though gathering the weight of the moment into herself. "It's about the reef, the magic that binds us all, and the future we want to protect." Her eyes met his with a quiet intensity, as though she could see past their personal fears, past the sacrifice looming ahead, to the larger picture, the one where the reef and the balance of the world they had fought for were restored. The truth of her words lingered in the air, undeniable and irrefutable. This wasn't just their battle, it was everyone's, and the cost was something they both had to bear. Her words settled into Adrian's chest, a mixture of admiration and heartache welling up inside him. The prophecy had called for both of them, and despite the personal stakes, they had already been bound by it long before they had ever understood the true depth of their connection. "We're in this together," she added, her voice steady, the faintest trace of resolve threading through every syllable. Adrian could feel her resolve like an unbreakable thread weaving between them, and though the ache in his chest grew deeper, he couldn't deny the truth of what she said. They had come this far together, facing impossible odds side by side, and there was no way to walk away now. The magic that had bound them to this moment, to the fate of the reef, was a force they could no longer deny. As much as he wanted to shield her from the cost of it, he knew that their futures were forever entwined in this fight. Serena's unyielding determination filled him with the same fierce resolve, and though the sacrifice was still a heavy burden, he understood that, in the end, it would be worth it, for them, for the reef, for everyone. Adrian clenched his fists, the tension in his muscles a physical manifestation of the storm of emotions that churned inside him. The urge to protect her, to shield Serena from the pain that was about to unfold, almost overwhelmed him. His heart felt heavy with the thought of her bearing such a burden, of her sacrificing something irreplaceable, when he would do anything to carry it for her. His gaze flickered to the shimmering fragments of the Heartstone, and then back to Serena, whose expression held steady resolve. Every part of him screamed to find a way, any way, to spare her from what the prophecy had foretold. But as much as he fought against it, he knew the undeniable truth. She was right. The prophecy had been clear, and they had already come too far to turn back now. The price of restoring the reef, of breaking the curse that had plagued them for so long, required both of them to make a sacrifice, one from the land, and one from the sea. The weight of that truth settled over him like a dark cloud, suffocating in its finality. The realization hit him with the force of a crashing wave, the cold sting of acceptance mixing with the lingering warmth of his emotions. Adrian had always known that this moment would come, that they would face a choice either of them was prepared for. But now that it was here, the clarity of it felt brutal. The curse could not be undone with only one sacrifice. The balance demanded both. His mind raced back to everything they had fought for, the countless battles, the allies lost, the hard-won victories, and the truth that had always loomed in the background. Only by giving up something precious could they restore balance to the reef. His eyes met Serena's again, and in that look, he saw the same quiet acceptance that had carried them through the darkest moments of their journey. She had known from the start that this was the cost, and now, as they stood on the precipice of that final decision, the bond between them felt stronger than ever. They had come this far together, and now, together, they would face whatever lay ahead, no matter the price. Serena reached out, her hand finding his with a gentle but firm touch, as if her very presence could anchor him in the storm of emotions that threatened to pull him under. Her skin was warm, her fingers steady as they closed over his, and in that moment, Adrian could feel the strength that had carried them both this far. Her touch was more than just a physical connection, it was a reminder of everything they had already endured, every trial they had overcome together. Her eyes met his, filled with a quiet but resolute determination that made his heart ache with both admiration and sorrow. "We've faced every challenge together, Adrian," she said softly, her voice unwavering despite the gravity of the moment. "We can do this. We have to." Her words, though simple, held an unspoken promise. A promise that no matter what the cost, they would face it side by side. Serena's resolve was like a steady flame, burning through the fear and doubt that had taken root in his heart. She had always been his strength in the darkest of times, and now, as they stood on the precipice of their final trial, her belief in them, in their bond, filled him with the courage he had nearly lost. Adrian squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of her words settle into his chest. She was right. They had come this far together, and together, they would face whatever lay ahead. It wasn't just about breaking the curse or restoring the reef. It was about their journey, their shared strength, and the unbreakable connection between them. Adrian's resolve solidified, hardening like steel forged in the heat of battle. As he stood there, feeling the weight of the decision that loomed before them, he realized just how deeply he had come to care for Serena. What had begun as an alliance born of necessity had evolved into something far stronger, far more meaningful. Her strength had drawn him in from the very start, her courage a beacon in the darkest moments of their journey. But it was her unwavering commitment to the reef, to protecting everything they had fought for, that had inspired him to be better, to push forward even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Serena's dedication to this cause had become a part of him, and in her, he saw a reflection of his own deepest desires, of a future where the reef thrived, and where they could stand together, free of the shadows that had haunted them for so long. With that realization, the truth became clear. He could not, would not, let Serena face this alone. The cost of the final ritual was too high, too personal, and despite the fear gnawing at his insides, he could not stand by and let her bear the weight of it on her own. He had already witnessed her strength, her willingness to sacrifice everything for the greater good. But now, as their shared destiny hung in the balance, he understood that their bond was not just one of necessity. It was one of mutual trust, respect, and love. They had come this far together, and together, they would face whatever price the prophecy demanded. He would not let her go through this final test without him by her side, no matter the cost. Adrian's voice broke through the heavy silence, rough with the emotions that churned within him. He knew the question had to be asked, that it was the final step in this long journey, but the words tasted bitter on his tongue. His heart was heavy with the weight of the decision they both had to make, and as he looked at Serena, the gravity of the moment settled over him like a shroud. The ritual that would break the curse and restore balance to the reef required a sacrifice, something precious, irreplaceable, and he had always known that this day would come. But asking Serena what she would be willing to give, what part of herself she would have to part with, felt like asking her to give up everything they had fought for. His voice, when it came, was softer than he intended, trembling with the rawness of his feelings. "What will you give?" he asked quietly, the words barely more than a whisper in the stillness between them. The question echoed in the space between them, heavy with the implications of what it meant. Serena stood before him, her expression unreadable, but the tightness in her jaw and the steady resolve in her gaze told him she already knew what the answer would be. It was a question no one could ever fully be ready to answer, and yet, in the silence that followed, Adrian knew they both understood the cost of their mission. To break the curse, to restore the reef, would demand the ultimate price. And while part of him wished he could bear that burden for her, he knew this was a choice either of them could escape. What would she give? The question hung in the air like the calm before a storm, waiting for her answer, waiting for them both to come to terms with the sacrifice that would bind them together forever. Serena's gaze shifted toward the horizon, where the ocean stretched out in endless expanse, a vast, undulating world she had known and loved since she could remember. The water had always been a part of her, its ebb and flow as familiar to her as the beating of her own heart. But now, as the weight of their decision pressed upon them, she could feel the bittersweetness of that connection. The ocean had been her home, but it had also been her cage. The curse that bound her to the reef had granted her the unique ability to protect it, to be its guardian and its steward. Yet that very power had come at a high price, the price of her freedom. She had never been able to leave, to step beyond the boundaries of the reef without suffering a deep, unrelenting pull that dragged her back. Serena's voice was steady, though a hint of sadness lingered beneath her words as she turned back to Adrian. "My freedom," she said, her eyes locking with his, as though the truth she was about to share might carry more weight than the curse itself. "The curse that bound me to the reef also gave me the ability to protect it, but it came at the cost of my freedom to leave." She swallowed hard, a faint tremor in her voice as she spoke the next part, the part she had been dreading. "If we break the curse, I'll be released from my duties, but I'll lose my ability to return to the sea as I am now." The finality of her words hung in the air, heavy with the realization that the ocean she had once called home would no longer be her place of refuge. Whatever the cost, the sacrifice would reshape her, and the bond she had with the sea would be irrevocably changed. Adrian's heart clenched tightly at the thought of Serena giving up her connection to the ocean, the very essence of who she was. The weight of her sacrifice pressed on him like a physical force, suffocating in its intensity. He had known the ritual would demand much from both of them, but hearing it so plainly spoken, knowing what it would cost her, struck him harder than he could have ever anticipated. To take away her freedom, to sever her ties to the sea that had been her home and her strength, felt like a betrayal to the very essence of her spirit. He could see it in her eyes, the quiet resolve, the acceptance of what needed to be done. But the idea of her losing that bond, of watching her drift away from the place that had shaped her, felt like something irreparable, something that would change her in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. His voice caught in his throat as he reached out, his hand trembling slightly as he tried to find the words to express the turmoil in his chest. "Serena." The single word held everything, his fear, his sorrow, his overwhelming desire to protect her from this fate. He couldn't imagine her without the ocean, without the power that coursed through her, the part of her that had always seemed inseparable from the very water she had sworn to protect. It wasn't just her freedom she was sacrificing, but a part of herself. The thought of her enduring that loss, of watching her step away from the world she knew, twisted something deep within him. He wanted to protect her, to shield her from this pain, but he knew, just as she did, that it was the price they had to pay. Serena smiled softly, a sadness in her eyes that spoke volumes of the weight of her decision, but beneath that sadness was an unmistakable sense of acceptance. She had long known that the price of restoring balance to the reef would come at the cost of her own freedom, and now, as the moment drew nearer, she could feel the finality of it settling over her like a shroud. But even in the face of such a profound loss, there was a quiet strength in her. "It's a small price to pay for the lives that will be saved," she said, her voice steady, though the underlying emotion trembled like the pulse of the ocean itself. "For the future of the reef." She glanced out toward the water, where the waves kissed the shore, a reminder of the world she had protected for so long. Her smile deepened, though it remained bittersweet. "And I'll still have my memories, my love for the sea," she added, her voice softening as if reassuring herself. "That will never change." It was a promise, a quiet vow that no matter what was lost in the ritual, no one could take away the bond she had with the ocean. Though the physical ties that bound her to it would be severed, the essence of her connection, the love, the devotion, the sense of belonging, would remain untouched. The sea would always be a part of her, woven into the very fabric of her soul. And with that, she was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that her sacrifice was for something greater than herself. Adrian's throat tightened as he spoke, the weight of his decision pressing down on him with every word. The ocean had always been his domain, the ship his sanctuary. For years it had been more than just a vessel, it was his home, his passion, the culmination of his dreams and hard work. But now, as the reality of the sacrifice they both had to make became clearer, Adrian understood that nothing he had could outweigh the importance of breaking the curse and restoring balance to the reef. "And I'll give up my ship, my life as a captain," he said, his voice thick with emotion, but unwavering. The words were harder to say than he had imagined, as though something inside him was being torn away with each syllable. He took a deep breath, steadying himself as the decision solidified within him. "The ship has been my home, my life's work," he continued, his gaze steady despite the turmoil swirling in his chest. "But to break the curse, I'll relinquish my claim to the ocean, to the freedom I've known. His hands tightened at his sides, the loss of the life he had built on the waves sinking in. I'll settle on land, build a new life there. The idea of leaving the sea, of stepping away from the freedom it had always given him, was almost incomprehensible. But as the words left his mouth, he felt the certainty of his choice take root. Serena's sacrifice had been clear from the start, but now, his own commitment to the cause, his own willingness to give up everything he knew, became undeniable. Together, they would face the future, whatever it held. Serena squeezed Adrian's hand, her heart heavy with the weight of his sacrifice. She could see the storm of emotions brewing in his eyes, the unspoken pain of what he was about to give up, the freedom of the open sea, the ship that had been his constant companion, and the life he had built upon the waves. For Adrian, the sea was not just a place. It was a part of him, a living, breathing extension of his soul. Giving it up wasn't just a matter of relinquishing a possession, it was an act of profound loss. Serena could feel the enormity of it in the way his hand trembled in hers, the subtle weight of what he was preparing to give up. And yet, she also saw the resolve in his gaze, the unwavering commitment that came from something deeper than personal desire. She understood, more than anyone, that this was the only way to break the curse, to restore balance, and save the reef that had bound them both. She knew the ocean was Adrian's world, the place where he had always felt free, and to see him willing to sacrifice that was a testament to the bond they had forged, a bond that had been tested through every trial they had faced. This wasn't just about the reef or the magic. It was about them, about their shared purpose, their unity in the face of an impossible choice. Serena's heart swelled with gratitude and love for him, knowing that the strength of their connection was what made this sacrifice possible. He would give up everything for the greater good, for them, and for the future they would build together, no matter where that might be. Serena's voice trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of what lay ahead. The calm before the storm seemed almost unnatural, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Her heart pounded in her chest as she turned to Adrian, her eyes searching his for any sign of doubt, but finding none. The decision had been made, the sacrifices were clear, and now the moment had come to face whatever the ritual would demand of them. She could feel the magic of the reef swirling around them, alive with anticipation, as though it too understood the magnitude of what was about to unfold. Her hand still held his, steadying herself against the storm of emotions inside her, but her voice remained soft, almost fragile. "Are you ready?" she asked, her words carrying a quiet finality. Adrian stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the heartstone fragments, the remnants of a power that had once held them both captive. His expression was calm, but beneath the surface, his thoughts raced. Everything they had fought for, everything they had endured, had led to this moment. The time for hesitation was past. He could feel the pull of the sea, the life he would have to leave behind, and yet he knew there was no other path. The curse would be broken, and the reef would be saved, but not without sacrifice. His grip on her hand tightened, a silent promise that no matter what came, they would face it together. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady, though it carried the weight of everything he was about to lose. In his heart, there was no other choice. Adrian's gaze locked with Serena's, and for a moment, the weight of their shared journey seemed to hang between them. There was a deep sorrow in his eyes, the kind that comes from knowing that some parts of oneself must be left behind in the pursuit of something greater. Yet, beneath the sorrow, there was a resolve that burned brighter than any storm. His hand, still holding hers, tightened slightly, a gesture that spoke of his unwavering commitment. He had known from the start that this day would come, the moment when the cost of breaking the curse would be paid in full. But even with the sacrifice looming, he felt an inner strength he hadn't anticipated, born from the very connection they had forged through every battle, every trial they had faced together. His voice, though thick with emotion, rang with a quiet firmness as he spoke the words they both knew had to be said. "Yes," he said, the words simple yet laden with everything they had fought for. It was a final step toward the end of a journey that had shaped them both in ways they had never imagined. "Let's end this." The words were not just a call to action, they were a promise. one that affirmed their shared purpose and the bond that had grown stronger with each passing challenge. There was no turning back now, but Adrian had no regrets. Whatever came next, he would face it with Serena at his side. Together, they would end the curse and protect the reef, no matter the cost. Adrian and Serena knelt side by side on the reef, their fingers lightly brushing the heartstone fragments that lay between them. The moment felt suspended in time, as if the very world was watching, waiting for them to make the final choice that would change everything. The air around them crackled with a palpable tension, the ancient magic of the reef stirring in response to their combined resolve. Though the forces that had bound the ocean's power were now weaker, remnants of that energy still clung to the depths, vibrating with the urgency of what was to come. The water around them shimmered, its surface glowing with a soft, ethereal light that seemed to pulse with life, as if the ocean itself was awakening to their intentions. The sea, so often a force of chaos and power, now seemed to hold its breath, suspended in a moment of fragile stillness. As the magic of the reef gathered, it wrapped around them both, cool and warm all at once, like a familiar embrace, its essence old and ancient, yet somehow new. Serena's heart beat in time with the subtle rhythm of the water, the vibrations sinking deep into her soul. She could feel the strength of the sea flowing through her, like a current pulling her towards something greater, something beyond herself. Beside her, Adrian was equally attuned to the pulse of the water, his body tense with concentration. Their bond, forged in the heat of battle and sealed through shared sacrifice, thrummed in the air around them, growing stronger with each passing second. The sea, the heartstone, the very earth beneath them, they were all alive with the knowledge that this ritual would either end in destruction or salvation. But whatever the outcome, they knew they would face it together. Serena's fingers trembled slightly as she placed her hand over the heartstone fragments, her touch warm yet filled with an electric anticipation. The pieces, once whole and powerful, now lay scattered in a broken circle between them, their glow faint but unmistakably present. Adrian's hand settled beside hers, the contact solid and steady, grounding them both. Together, they felt the pull of the reef's ancient magic, a force that had shaped the tides of fate for centuries, now awakened by their combined presence. As they began to chant the words of the ritual, their voices blended into one, the ancient incantations flowing from their lips as if they had been spoken 1,000 times before. There was no room for hesitation. This was the culmination of everything they had endured, every sacrifice made, every bond formed. The words seemed to echo not only through the air but also beneath the water, reverberating deep into the heart of the ocean itself. The water around them seemed to respond in kind, rippling with energy, as though the very currents were alive with the magic they invoked. The sea, once turbulent and wild, now pulsed with a steady rhythm, in sync with the ritual they were performing. The energy surged through their bodies, filling the air with an electric hum that resonated with the power of their shared sacrifice. It was as if the reef itself was listening, attuned to the resonance of their hearts, and the purity of their intent. The magic of the reef, though weakened, now surged in waves around them, drawn to the strength of their bond and the determination that anchored them. With every word they spoke, the heartstone fragments began to glow brighter, their light flickering in harmony with the flow of the ritual, as the ocean held its breath, waiting for the curse to finally be broken. As the words of the ritual spilled from their lips, the heartstone fragments began to react, the magic within them awakening in response to the power of Serena and Adrian's united resolve. The fragments trembled, their faint glow deepening, then blossoming into a brilliant radiance that illuminated the reef in a shimmering halo. Each pulse of light seemed to carry the weight of the ocean's ancient power, growing more intense with every uttered word. The energy within the heartstone swelled, its magic responding to the purity of the sacrifices that had been made, both personal and profound. The very air around them thickened with magic, and the water itself seemed to hum, a soft vibration rising from the depths, as though the ocean had finally recognized their commitment to its survival. With each passing moment, the stone fused together, its fractured pieces drawing toward one another as if bound by an invisible force stronger than gravity itself. As the heartstone began to reassemble, the ocean reacted with a force all its own. The currents around them twisted and swirled, coming alive in a dazzling display of light and shadow. The water seemed to pulse with energy, moving in rhythm with the growing power of the ritual. It was as if the ocean had become sentient, swirling in patterns that mirrored the intensity of their connection. Waves of light spiraled around Serena and Adrian, the glow from the heart stone blending seamlessly with the movement of the sea. The currents wrapped around them like a protective cocoon, drawing them deeper into the ritual's heart. For a moment, the world outside their circle ceased to exist, leaving only the two of them and the ocean's undulating rhythm. The magic, ancient and raw, surged through them, binding them to the sea and to each other in ways they had never imagined, as the heart stone's power finally reached its peak. With a final, resounding word, the air seemed to tremble, the ritual reaching its peak. The heart stone flared with a brilliant, almost blinding light, its power amplified by the sacrifices Serena and Adrian had made. It was as though the very heart of the ocean had responded, a pulse of pure, untainted magic radiating outward from the stone. The light grew blinding, searing through the depths and over the surface of the water, sweeping over the reef like a wave of cleansing fire. The energy surged in every direction, an unstoppable force that rippled through the ocean, its warmth and light touching every corner of the sea, breaking the darkness that had clung to the reef for centuries. The curse, once so deeply entrenched, began to dissolve, its remnants fading away like mist before the dawn. As the power of their sacrifices was unleashed, the energy spread further, past the reef and out into the open ocean, unraveling the twisted remnants of the curse with each passing moment. The water, once heavy with the oppressive weight of the darkness, now shimmered with a newfound purity, its surface gleaming with the light that poured from the heart stone. The magic surged through the currents, sweeping across the sea like a fresh breeze, invigorating everything it touched. The darkness, once so all-encompassing, was eradicated, dissolved into nothingness by the force of the light. In its place, the ocean breathed freely again, the ancient magic that had protected it for so long now restored to its rightful balance. For the first time in centuries, the reef stood unburdened, its true power freed, and the bond between the sea and those who had fought for it stronger than ever. The light enveloped them in a radiant cocoon, the world outside fading into nothingness as the energy of the heart stone consumed everything around them. Time seemed to stand still in that moment, the ocean holding its breath, the air thick with magic and the profound weight of their shared sacrifice. Adrian and Serena could feel the raw power of the ritual surrounding them, as though the ocean itself was acknowledging their commitment, its pulse in harmony with theirs. There was no sound, no movement, only the unbroken brilliance of the light that seemed to stretch forever. And then, slowly, the light began to fade, retreating like the tide, leaving only the faint glow of the heart stone's final remnants in the water. As the light dimmed, a quiet stillness settled over the reef, but within Adrian and Serena, the reality of their sacrifices sank deep. Serena's connection to the sea had changed. She could feel the pull of the ocean within her, the steady rhythm of its currents that had once been a constant presence now slipping through her grasp. A bittersweet ache filled her chest as the bond she had carried for so long weakened, its ties loosening in a way that was both painful and relieving. She was free, but at what cost? Adrian, too, felt the sharp pang of loss. The ship, the freedom of the open sea, the life he had built upon the waves, it all felt distant now, like sand slipping through his fingers. His heart ached at the thought of leaving it behind, but he knew this was the only way to truly end the curse. The ocean was still within him, but its presence would never be the same again. Both of them had given up pieces of themselves, and though their hearts remained entwined, the weight of what they had sacrificed would stay with them forever. As the last traces of the light faded and the ocean settled into a calm tranquility, Adrian and Serena felt a profound sense of peace wash over them, tempered by the weight of their sacrifices. There was an undeniable stillness in the water, a deep quiet that had not been there before. The curse was broken, the oppressive darkness that had clung to the reef for so long now gone, leaving behind only the vibrant, untamed magic of the ocean. The reef, once a shadow of its true self, was now alive again, its power restored, the balance between land and sea finally renewed. They had given everything to protect it, and in the quiet aftermath, there was a clarity, a certainty, that they had done what they set out to do. The cost had been immense, yet the beauty of the world around them, the promise of a future untouched by the curse, made it all feel worth it. Serena looked out across the water, her silver hair glistening in the soft light of the rising sun. The sea, once a realm that held her captive, now felt like a place of freedom, freedom she had fought for, alongside Adrian, with everything she had. She could feel the magic of the reef pulsing, alive and vibrant, resonating within her as it never had before. Adrian, standing by her side, felt the weight of the ocean in his heart, but there was no regret. The life he had known was gone, but it had been replaced with something deeper, something more meaningful. They had succeeded, and though their personal losses would stay with them, there was no question in their minds that the sacrifice had been worth it. The world they had saved was beautiful, and for the first time, they could truly breathe in its new dawn. Together, they had restored balance, and that was the greatest gift of all. Serena turned her gaze to Adrian, her heart brimming with emotions she could hardly put into words. The bond they had forged throughout their journey, the shared trials and sacrifices, had brought them to this moment, a moment of both profound loss and deep fulfillment. She could feel the weight of everything they had endured pressing against her chest, but beneath it was an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for his unwavering strength, for his support when she had faltered, and for the sacrifices he had made to ensure the reef's survival. She had always known he was a man of great heart, but now, seeing him beside her, standing in the quiet aftermath of their battle, she felt as though she was finally seeing the full depth of his soul. Her voice was soft, but it carried all the sincerity of her feelings. "Thank you," she whispered, the words a gentle release of the gratitude that had built up inside her. "For everything." The simple phrase felt like a lifetime of emotions packed into a single breath. A thank you for his courage, his sacrifice, and the quiet moments when he had been her anchor. Serena's eyes glistened with tears, but they were not tears of sorrow. Instead, they were tears of quiet recognition and deep affection for the man who had stood by her side, through every storm and every challenge. They had come through this ordeal together, and in the stillness that followed, Serena knew that no matter where their paths took them next, they would always be bound by this shared experience. Adrian's smile was soft but filled with an intensity that matched the depth of his words. As he looked at Serena, he saw not just the woman who had fought beside him, but the one who had shown him a new perspective on life, one where the things that truly mattered were worth fighting for, even at the greatest cost. His eyes softened as he took a step closer to her, the weight of their shared journey settling between them, but also lightening the burden they had carried. In Serena, he had found not just a companion, but a reminder that some battles were more than just about survival. They were about protecting what was precious, what was worth preserving, and what was worth sacrificing for. His voice, though quiet, was firm with conviction. "No, Serena." "Thank you," he said, his gaze never leaving hers, "for showing me that some things are worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for." In that moment, Adrian understood something he hadn't before. True strength wasn't just about wielding a sword or commanding a crew. It was about the willingness to give everything for something greater than oneself. Serena had been that greater thing for him. She had awakened a sense of purpose in him that transcended the world he had known, and now, standing in the aftermath of their victory, Adrian realized that he had given up his freedom and his future not just for the reef, but for her, and for the life they might build together in its wake. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the lingering clouds, casting a warm, golden glow across the reef, Adrian and Serena stood side by side, their hands still intertwined. The sea before them, calm now but still holding its secrets, seemed to hum with a quiet energy, as if acknowledging the monumental change that had taken place. Though the storm had passed, and the reef had been freed from its curse, neither of them could ignore the weight of the journey that had brought them here. The battle was over, but the world they now faced was different, and the challenges ahead would not be easily overcome. Yet, as they stood there in the fragile peace of dawn, they knew something had shifted, not just in the world, but within them as well. Their bond, forged in the crucible of their shared sacrifices and strengthened by the trials they had faced, was unbreakable. No longer was the ocean the only force that bound them. It was the love and respect they had cultivated for one another, the deep understanding that came from having laid everything bare in the name of something greater than themselves. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, they faced it with the certainty that they would meet it together. Whatever lay ahead, whether it be new adventures, dangers, or quiet moments of peace, they would face it side by side, their hearts intertwined by the sacrifices they had made and the unspoken promise of all that was yet to come. As the sun slowly rose over the horizon, its golden light spilling across the calm waters of the reef, a sense of renewal filled the air. The ocean, once dark and tumultuous, now shimmered with a soft, inviting glow, reflecting the warmth of the dawn. Serena and Adrian stood together at the edge of the reef, their gazes fixed on the vast expanse of water before them. The future stretched out before them, a world full of untold possibilities. Though the path ahead was still uncertain, there was a quiet strength between them, a shared understanding that no matter what challenges they might face, they were no longer bound by the past. The weight of their sacrifices had not been in vain. The magic of the ocean, now restored, seemed to pulse with new life, mirroring the hope that blossomed in their hearts. With each breath of the salt-tinged air, they felt the promise of a fresh start, one where the bond they had forged could guide them through whatever awaited. The sun's rays wrapped them in a warm embrace, and for the first time, they saw the future not as a distant, daunting unknown, but as a realm full of potential. Together, they were ready to step forward, their hearts full of hope and the unspoken vow to embrace whatever came next, knowing they would face it hand in hand. Chapter 38: The Ritual's Success. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, its golden hues spilling across the surface of the tranquil sea. The water, once dark and turbulent, now shimmered in the soft glow of morning, as if reborn along with the reef itself. Adrian and Serena stood at the very heart of the reef, their hands still clasped tightly together, a silent testament to the strength of the bond they had forged. The remnants of the ritual's magic still hung in the air, crackling faintly like the lingering echo of an ancient spell, swirling around them in a gentle but persistent hum. The world felt suspended in time, the calm after the storm both surreal and comforting. Between them, the Heartstone lay, now whole and pulsing with a steady, tranquil light. Its once fractured surface had fused back together, and it glowed softly with the power of their sacrifice and the magic of the ocean. It was a symbol of the battle they had fought, the curse they had broken, and the future they had restored. In the quiet, still moments that followed, they both allowed themselves a brief sense of peace, knowing that the cost had been great, but the reward even greater. The reef was free, the magic of the ocean revived, and together, they had achieved what once seemed impossible. The ritual was complete. As the last echoes of their chant faded into the stillness of the morning, a palpable shift seemed to sweep through the reef, as if the very essence of the ocean had taken a deep, rejuvenating breath. The once darkened waters, tainted and clouded by the curse that had plagued them for centuries, began to clear, revealing their natural beauty once more. The depths, once shrouded in shadow, now shimmered with a crystalline blue, reflecting the first rays of sunlight like a vast, serene mirror. The water's clarity was a stark contrast to the murkiness it had once held, a sign of the curse's final dissolution and the reef's restoration. The coral, which had been stripped of its brilliance under the weight of the curse, now pulsed with vibrant hues, fiery reds, deep oranges, and cool blues, each reef formation glowing with newfound life. The once lifeless and desolate underwater gardens were now bustling with energy, the air thick with the movements of creatures returning to their rightful home. Schools of fish darted through the colorful coral, their scales flashing like sparks of light in the clear water. Sea creatures of every size and shape glided effortlessly through the lush landscape, their movements creating a symphony of motion that spoke of the reef's rebirth. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the ocean was alive, thriving, and full of promise once again. Adrian stood still for a moment, the weight of the moment sinking deep into his bones. A rush of relief washed over him, mingling with awe and disbelief as he took in the sight of the vibrant reef around him. The curse that had loomed over them for so long, the darkness that had threatened not only the reef but everything they had fought for, was finally gone. The waters were clear, the coral radiant, and life had returned to its natural rhythm. He could scarcely believe it, but the unmistakable feeling of peace that filled the air confirmed what they had accomplished. They had done it. The ancient curse that had held the reef captive for centuries had been broken, and with it, a new chapter had begun. He turned to Serena, his gaze softening as he saw her standing beside him, her eyes wide with wonder. The transformation of the reef seemed to mirror her own sense of amazement, her features illuminated by the light that now bathed everything in warmth. She took in the beauty around her, her breath steady but full of quiet awe, as if she were seeing the world anew. For a moment, Adrian simply watched her, her strength, her resolve, her unshakable commitment to the ocean and everything it stood for. Together, they had faced the impossible and emerged victorious. And now, in the calm after the storm, the reef was not only saved, it was reborn, just like the bond between them. "We did it," Adrian murmured, his voice thick with emotion, the words barely escaping his lips as if he still couldn't fully grasp the enormity of their victory. He felt a sense of awe settle in his chest, a heavy but satisfying weight that pushed against the tension that had gripped him for so long. The relief of knowing that the battle, the sacrifice, and the trials they had endured were finally behind them washed over him in waves. It was a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to experience until now, the profound peace that came from knowing they had succeeded, that they had freed the reef and broken the curse. The weight of everything they had given up, of the battles fought and lost, seemed to lift, leaving only the raw and tender realization of what they had truly accomplished. As he stood beside Serena, their hands still linked in a quiet bond of shared triumph, Adrian's heart swelled with gratitude. They had faced so much together, pushed to their limits, yet here they were, victorious. He turned his gaze toward her, the soft glow of the reef's renewal reflecting in her eyes, and felt a deep swell of affection and admiration. In that moment, it was clear to him that their journey wasn't just about breaking a curse or saving a reef. It was about the bond they had forged in the fire of their struggles. "We did it," he repeated, as if saying it aloud made it more real, more permanent, and more meaningful than anything else. Serena nodded, her eyes fixed on the heartstone, the light from its gentle pulse reflecting in her gaze as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. The stone, now whole and radiant, symbolized everything they had fought for, every sacrifice made, every challenge overcome. The air around them seemed to hum with energy, charged with the magic of the ritual, and the very ocean beneath them felt as though it had taken a deep breath. Her heart raced with a flood of emotions, relief, joy, and the faintest tremor of disbelief, as she absorbed the full weight of the moment. After everything they had endured, after the darkness that had held the reef captive for so long, it was finally over. She had never imagined she'd live to see this day, the day the reef would be free. "The curse is broken," she whispered, her voice thick with the weight of her emotions, the words carrying a deep resonance that seemed to echo through the water around them. Her throat tightened as she said them, and she felt a rush of gratitude and sorrow all at once. The reef, her home, the place that had both bound and defined her, was now free to thrive again. It was no longer a place shrouded in darkness, its beauty obscured by the curse that had held it hostage for centuries. "The reef is free," she repeated, her voice quieter this time, as though saying the words aloud could make them real, could make the finality of it sink in. With the curse lifted, the ocean could heal, and so could they. A soft, warm breeze swept across the water, ruffling the surface and carrying the familiar scent of salt. It was a scent that had once been heavy with the weight of uncertainty, but now, it felt light, infused with the promise of new beginnings. The air was cool and refreshing against their skin, a stark contrast to the oppressive heaviness that had hung over the reef for so long. The ocean, once dark and foreboding, now seemed to hum with a quiet peace, its vastness no longer a realm of danger and fear but a sanctuary of balance restored. The shifting tides, once tumultuous and wild under the curse's influence, now ebbed and flowed gently, as if the sea itself had exhaled a long-held breath, embracing the stillness that came with its newfound freedom. The currents that had once been chaotic and violent, stirring up the depths in an eternal battle of opposing forces, now swirled in harmonious patterns, their rhythm steady and soothing. The water around them sparkled in the early light, as though every drop had been washed clean, rejuvenated by the magic of the ritual and the sacrifices made. Beneath the surface, the corals swayed lazily, vibrant with color, teeming with life once more. Fish darted through the clear water in playful spirals, and the ocean floor gleamed, its once dull sands now gleaming with an untouched beauty. It was a tranquil scene, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the ocean was not just a place of refuge but of rebirth, its true nature restored, its spirit renewed. Serena closed her eyes, her breath steady as she let the magic of the reef wash over her like a gentle wave. The energy that had once bound her so tightly to the ocean, to the very heart of the reef, now felt different, lighter, freer, but still deeply intertwined with her spirit. She could feel the shift within her, a subtle but profound change that resonated through every fiber of her being. The curse that had once tethered her to the water, a relentless force that dictated her every action, was no longer a weight on her soul. She was no longer a prisoner of her duties, no longer confined by the boundaries of her curse. And yet, as she stood there, surrounded by the ocean's newfound serenity, she realized that her bond to the sea was still intact, stronger than ever, but no longer born from obligation. It was now a choice, a connection forged through love and devotion, not by magic, but by her own will. The sacrifice she had made, the freedom she had given up, no longer felt like a loss. It felt like a gift, something she had willingly given to ensure the future of the reef, to protect the life that swam within it, and to preserve the delicate balance of the ocean. The cost of breaking the curse had been great, but standing there, feeling the reef pulse with vitality and strength once more, Serena knew it had been worth it. The freedom she had chosen was not one of physical escape, but one of peace and purpose, a peace that resonated deeply within her, as though she had finally found her true place in the world. The ocean, now vibrant and full of life, was her home, and always would be, but it was her love for it, not the curse, that would keep her tethered to its waters. Adrian watched Serena, his heart swelling with admiration and gratitude as he saw the quiet strength in her eyes. She had given up so much, her freedom, the very essence of who she had been, for the sake of the reef, for its survival and its future. It was a sacrifice few could understand, but he saw it in the way she stood there, resolute and calm, despite the weight of what she had let go. Her connection to the ocean had always been deep, intrinsic, and to give that up was no small thing. Yet, despite the pain of the loss, there was a light in her, a peace that spoke to the quiet pride of knowing she had done what was necessary, what was right. And as he reflected on his own sacrifices, Adrian felt the weight of his decision settle into him once more. He had let go of his ship, his life as a captain, the freedom of the open sea that had defined him for so long. But he had done it willingly, for the same cause, for the reef that had bound them together. The life he had once known had been full of adventure, of endless horizons and uncharted waters, but now that sense of freedom had been replaced by something far deeper. His sacrifice had been for the reef, yes, but also for Serena, for their bond, and the future they were now building together. Both of them had made sacrifices, but in doing so, they had created something far more lasting, a legacy stronger than anything either of them could have achieved alone. But as Adrian stood there, the sunlight glistening on the now vibrant reef, he felt no trace of regret. The weight of the sacrifices they had made, the ship he had relinquished, the life he had left behind, felt like a distant memory now, overshadowed by the strength of what they had accomplished together. The reef, once cursed and shrouded in darkness, now thrived, its colors vibrant, and its waters clear. It was a reflection of the bond they had forged, unbreakable, enduring. What they had given up no longer felt like a loss but a necessary part of the journey, a price for the greater good. The reef had been restored, but so too had they, transformed and bound together by the trials they had overcome. The bond they shared now was something deeper than any physical connection. It wasn't just about the battles they had fought or the magic they had wielded. It was the shared understanding, the silent acknowledgement that they had stood side by side, faced impossible odds, and emerged stronger for it. Their sacrifices had intertwined their fates in a way that transcended mere action. They had rebuilt not only the reef but the very foundation of their future. In this moment, standing together amidst the life that now flourished around them, Adrian knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as equals, their souls bound by the very sacrifice that had saved them all. Serena opened her eyes, her gaze locking with Adrian's. In that moment, everything they had endured, all the pain and the sacrifice, seemed to converge into the depth of her look. Her heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow, a quiet understanding passing between them, unspoken but deeply felt. The world around them, the restored reef, the clear sky above, the ocean now calm, seemed to fade as she focused entirely on him. Her voice was soft, yet it carried the weight of all they had been through, the trials they had faced together, and the price they had both paid. "Thank you," she whispered, the words heavy with meaning, a promise, and a final release of all the tension that had built up during their journey. Adrian held her gaze, the sincerity in her eyes echoing in his chest. He could feel the depth of her gratitude, but also the quiet pain that lingered from the sacrifices they had made. What they had accomplished, what they had lost, was more than he had ever imagined when they first set out on this journey. He knew, without a doubt, that the reef was not the only thing that had been restored. Their connection, forged in the fires of adversity, was something that no curse, no distance, could undo. His heart swelled with its own quiet gratitude as he reached out, brushing his thumb across her hand, silently offering his thanks in return. Adrian shook his head, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his lips, though the weight of their shared journey still lingered in his gaze. He couldn't let her bear all the gratitude alone, not when everything they had accomplished had been as much her doing as his. Her strength, her unwavering determination to protect the reef and everything within it, had been the bedrock of their success. It was that same strength that had kept them moving forward, even when the path had seemed impossible, when the curse had loomed over them like an insurmountable shadow. Serena had faced every trial with courage, never faltering, and in her, he had found not only a partner but someone who had shown him what it meant to fight for something greater than oneself. He reached for her hand, his fingers gently wrapping around hers, the familiar warmth of her touch grounding him in the present moment. "No, Serena." "Thank you." His voice was soft but firm, imbued with a sincerity that came from the heart. He was speaking not just to the woman beside him, but to the force of nature she embodied, the fierce protector of the sea, the one who had borne so much of the burden for the reef. She had believed in the impossible, in a future where the darkness could be defeated and the ocean could be restored. It was her belief, her hope, that had kept them both going when all seemed lost. "For your strength, your courage," he continued, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to convey all the emotions he could never quite put into words. "And for believing in this, in us." He gave her hand a gentle squeeze, the connection between them now something deeper than just physical. It was a bond forged in their sacrifices, their shared moments of despair and triumph. Adrian knew, in his heart, that none of this would have been possible without her, without Serena's ability to see the world as it could be, not just as it was. The future now felt as vast and boundless as the ocean itself, and as long as they faced it together, he knew they could conquer whatever came next. The sun climbed higher in the sky, its golden rays casting a warm glow over the reef, now alive with vibrant colors and life. Adrian and Serena stood side by side, the weight of the past lifting as the world around them seemed to breathe in harmony once more. The ritual that had brought them to this point had not only shattered the curse but had also redefined their lives. The magic that had bound the reef in darkness was gone, but what remained was a sense of renewal, a promise of a future shaped by their sacrifices and the bond they had forged together. In the quiet that followed, as the waves gently lapped at the shore, they understood that this was not merely an end, but the beginning of a new journey. The battles they had fought, the sacrifices they had made, had carved a path for the future. The reef, free from the curse, stood as a testament to their resolve. And as they looked ahead, they knew that whatever challenges the future held, they would face them together, bound not by a curse, but by the love and strength they had discovered within themselves. The Heartstone, now whole and glowing with a gentle, steady light, stood between them like a living testament to the power they had called upon and the balance they had reclaimed. Its soft pulse echoed the rhythm of the ocean, resonating with the energy that had been restored to the reef. It was a physical manifestation of their journey. Each shard, each piece of the stone, had been a step in the path they had walked together. The trials, the losses, the fear, it had all led to this moment, a culmination of everything they had endured. Yet, despite its weight and the sacrifices it represented, the stone radiated a warmth that felt like the embrace of the sea itself. More than just a symbol of the past, the heart stone was a beacon of hope, casting its light into the future. It reminded them that even in the darkest times, there was the potential for renewal. Their victory had restored not only the reef's magic but also the possibility of a new beginning. The future, once uncertain and clouded with the threat of the curse, now seemed full of promise. With the Heartstone as their guide, they knew they could face whatever lay ahead, knowing that their bond, shaped by the sea, the sacrifices, and the trials they had overcome, was unbreakable. Serena turned her gaze to the horizon, her silver hair fluttering gently in the warm breeze. The ocean before her was vast, stretching endlessly toward the horizon, its surface shimmering with the promise of new beginnings. The waters, once a source of danger and uncertainty, now held a quiet, almost inviting serenity. Yet, beneath the calm, a sense of curiosity and wonder stirred within her. She had given so much of herself to the reef, to the magic that had bound her to it, and now, with the curse broken, the future seemed as open and boundless as the sea itself. But with that freedom came uncertainty. What would her life be now? What path lay before them both, after everything they had sacrificed? Her question hung in the air, soft but profound. What now? Her voice was laced with a quiet vulnerability, a longing to know what the next chapter of her life would hold. Despite all the victories and the hope that now radiated from the restored reef, a part of her still wondered where their journey would take them. The ocean, once a prison, had become her sanctuary, but now it seemed as though the entire world was open to them, its vastness both a promise and a challenge. She turned back to Adrian, her eyes searching for answers, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together, as they always had. Adrian followed Serena's gaze, his heart calm as he took in the endless expanse of the ocean, its deep blue now reflecting the light of a new day. The vastness of the sea stretched before them, no longer a reminder of what had been lost, but a symbol of all they had gained. The wind whispered through the trees, the same gentle breeze that had carried them through countless trials. The ritual, the sacrifice, it was all behind them now, and as he stood beside Serena, he felt the weight of their journey slowly lift. They had faced the darkness, overcome the impossible, and in doing so, had forged something stronger than any curse. In this moment, there was no fear, no lingering doubts. There was only peace, and the realization that they had done more than survive, they had transformed. Now, he said, his voice steady, yet filled with a quiet resolve, we live. His gaze met hers, and the sincerity in his eyes was undeniable. We honor the sacrifices we've made, and we build a new future, together. The words hung in the air between them, a promise as vast and limitless as the ocean itself. There was so much to look forward to, so much to rebuild. And they would do it side by side, with the same strength and courage that had carried them through their darkest hours. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Adrian felt no fear, only the boundless hope that came from knowing they had each other. They stood there for a moment longer, side by side, the ocean's rhythmic waves crashing gently against the shore as if mirroring the steady beat of their hearts. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the weight of their shared triumph. The reef, once tainted by darkness, now thrived with life, its vibrant colors reflecting the healing power of their actions. Fish darted through the crystal-clear waters, and the coral that had been choked by the curse now swayed with the flow of a rejuvenated current. The air was different, fresher, alive with the scent of salt and new beginnings. As the reality of their victory settled in, it was almost overwhelming. The curse that had plagued this place for centuries was gone, and they had played a part in its undoing. But more than that, they had both discovered something in the process, something neither of them had expected. It wasn't just the restoration of the reef, nor the breaking of a centuries-old curse that had come to define them. It was the bond they had formed, the deep connection that had grown between them in the face of overwhelming odds. They had both sacrificed so much, yet what they had gained, this future, this life they could now build together, was worth every hardship. They had found in each other the strength to keep going, a future worth fighting for, one that was no longer shaped by the past but by the possibilities of what was to come. And for the first time, the horizon before them seemed not just wide and endless, but full of promise. With one last glance at the Heartstone, now glowing softly with the magic they had restored, they turned away from the ritual site. Their hands clasped tightly together, as if solidifying the promise they had made to one another, to face whatever came next, no matter how uncertain. The sea stretched out before them, once a realm of fear and darkness, but now a vast expanse of possibility. The storm that had plagued their lives, the curse that had twisted the ocean's magic, was gone, and in its place was a newfound sense of peace. The waves lapped gently against the reef, carrying with them the scent of salt and renewal, as if the ocean itself had been reborn alongside them. As they walked side by side toward the future, the weight of their shared sacrifices settled in, but so did a profound sense of hope. They had fought together, given everything they had for this moment, and emerged stronger for it. Whatever challenges awaited them, they knew they would face them together, united by their bond and the strength of the journey they had shared. They had not only restored the balance of the reef but had forged a connection that would see them through any storm, a love born from sacrifice and resilience. And as they walked into the light of a new day, they knew their story was far from over. It was just beginning. Chapter 39, A New Beginning. The sun hung high in the sky, its golden rays stretching across the vast expanse of the ocean, illuminating the crystal-clear waters of the reef. Serena glided through the water with an ease she hadn't felt in centuries, her movements fluid and graceful as she danced with the currents. The weight of the curse that had bound her to the reef for so long had lifted, leaving her feeling lighter than she ever thought possible. She reveled in the freedom that came with the restoration, the feeling of being unburdened, of no longer being a prisoner to the very magic she had once been bound to. The water, once an indifferent and isolating force, now seemed to embrace her, welcoming her into its depths as an equal. Her silver hair, now flowing freely behind her, shimmered like a trail of moonlight in the sun-dappled water. As she swam through the reef, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The coral beds, vibrant and alive, stretched in all directions, teeming with the life that had returned with the breaking of the curse. Fish darted in and out of the coral, their scales glinting in the sunlight, while the once murky waters had transformed into a brilliant tapestry of blue and green. Serena could feel the magic of the reef in the very currents around her, but now it was no longer the oppressive force it had once been. The Heartstone, its light glowing softly in the heart of the reef, had become a beacon of protection, not a chain. It pulsed with a rhythmic energy, a guardian of the balance they had fought so hard to restore. For the first time in ages, Serena felt a deep sense of connection to the sea without the shadow of the curse looming over her. She was no longer bound by duty or sacrifice. Instead, she swam with purpose, her every movement an expression of newfound freedom. The bond she shared with the ocean had evolved, no longer dictated by the curse's magic but by her own will and love for this place she had long protected. As she lingered in the reef, gazing out at the horizon, she knew that though the past had shaped her, it was the future that now beckoned. With Adrian by her side and the curse broken, she could finally embrace the endless possibilities that lay ahead, free to chart her own course in the vast, open sea. Serena broke the surface of the water, her breath coming in steady gasps as the warm breeze kissed her skin, ruffling her silver hair. She squinted against the sunlight, her gaze lifting to the horizon that stretched out before her. The ocean, once a vast and dark expanse filled with the weight of her curse, now appeared boundless and full of promise. The deep blues of the sea were no longer tainted by the shadow of the magic that had once chained her to the reef. Instead, the water gleamed with a clarity and vibrancy that reflected the freedom she had longed for. She could feel the vastness of the world around her, and for the first time, the endless ocean no longer felt like a prison, but a place of possibility. where the future was hers to shape. The weight that had burdened her for centuries was gone, replaced by a lightness she hadn't even realized she had been missing. No longer was she tethered to the reef by the ancient magic that had bound her to its shores. The curse had stolen her ability to leave, her connection to the sea a bittersweet reminder of the life she had been forced to forfeit. Now, as the heartstone pulsed gently at the heart of the reef, its magic no longer held her captive. It was a protector of the balance, not a binding force. Serena felt the profound relief of freedom fill her chest, as if she had finally taken a deep breath after years of suffocating under the weight of responsibility. For the first time in her life, Serena felt truly free, her heart no longer divided between duty and desire. The reef, the ocean, and all its secrets no longer held her in place. She was unshackled, and with that freedom came a newfound sense of wonder. The world around her seemed to shimmer with potential, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to dream. She was no longer defined by the curse or the sacrifices she had made for the reef's survival. With the sea spread out before her, its vastness offering both comfort and challenge, Serena knew that the future she had been denied for so long was now hers to explore. She could choose her path, no longer bound by the past, but free to embrace whatever the ocean might offer. The sensation of freedom washed over Serena like a wave crashing against the shore, exhilarating, wild, and completely surreal. For centuries, her life had been defined by the curse that bound her to the reef, her every thought, every breath, every action dictated by the ancient magic that forced her to protect this place. She had lived with the weight of it, the constant reminder of her responsibility, her connection to the sea, and the loss of her own freedom. But now, as the magic that had once chained her to the reef dissipated, she felt the world around her in a way she never had before. The heaviness was gone, replaced by an almost dizzying sense of possibility. It was as if the reef itself had released its grip on her soul, and for the first time, Serena was not just a guardian of its secrets, but a woman with choices. Every step she took felt lighter, as if the waters themselves were welcoming her back into their embrace. She no longer had to live in service of the reef's ancient magic. Instead, the sea was now a place of wonder, of freedom, and even of uncertainty. The thought of not knowing what lay ahead used to frighten her, but now, it was a thrill, an adventure waiting to unfold. The future, once a closed door, was now a vast, open horizon, and for the first time, she could truly see the endless possibilities before her. But with that exhilaration came a deep sense of unfamiliarity. Serena had lived for so long with the singular purpose of protecting the reef that the idea of living without it was both liberating and daunting. She had spent centuries watching over the sea, knowing that her duty came at the cost of her personal desires. Now, as the future stretched out before her, open and unknown, she found herself standing at a crossroads. The path ahead was unwritten, and she was free to choose it. Serena wasn't sure where she would go or what she would do, but for the first time, she felt an undeniable sense of hope, tempered with the realization that she was no longer bound by the past. The future was hers to shape, and in that uncertainty, she found the strength to embrace it. Adrian stood on the shore, his gaze fixed on the horizon, but there was an unmistakable sense of anticipation in the way he stood. His figure, tall and steady against the gentle waves, was a comforting presence amidst the vastness of the ocean. The golden light of the sun painted him in soft hues, casting a warmth that matched the peace settling within Serena's heart. She could feel his presence even before she saw him clearly, and the thought of him waiting for her there, grounded and unwavering, filled her with a sense of belonging she hadn't known she could feel. Serena swam towards him, her movements smooth and effortless in the clear, warm water. The sea, which had once been her prison, now felt like an ally, parting easily around her as if to guide her to the shore. Every stroke felt freer than the last, the currents now gentle, almost encouraging. She felt the pull of the sand beneath her, the sensation of leaving the water behind, a transition she had never known without the weight of the curse. As she neared the shore, she allowed herself to shift from her mermaid form, the smooth scales and shimmering tail transforming into legs, the familiar feeling of human form grounding her once more. Her feet sank into the sand, and she felt the earth beneath her like a connection to this new life. With a quiet, almost effortless movement, Serena stepped fully onto the shore, her heart pounding with both exhilaration and quiet pride. The transition from sea to land, from a creature bound to a curse to a woman walking freely in the world, felt like a reclamation of something she had almost forgotten. The confidence that filled her was new, but it was unmistakable. The confidence of someone who had weathered storms, fought for freedom, and emerged stronger on the other side. As she approached Adrian, the weight of the past seemed to fall away entirely, and all that remained was the present, with Adrian standing before her as a symbol of all the possibilities yet to come. Adrian's smile was like a beacon in the soft light of the day, his eyes bright with warmth and a hint of anticipation. As Serena approached, his gaze softened, and for a moment she saw only the unspoken understanding between them. The air around them seemed to hum with a quiet energy, a reflection of the calm that had settled over the reef, now free of the curse. His presence was steady and grounding, like an anchor in the vast sea of possibilities stretching before them. She could feel the depth of his gaze, as if he were waiting for her to answer not just with words, but with the truth that had been building within her since the ritual. "How does it feel?" His voice was rich with curiosity, but there was something else there too, something tender, as though he truly wanted to know how this moment of freedom and transformation felt for her. It was a question that seemed to encompass not just her release from the curse, but everything that had brought them here, the trials they had faced, the sacrifices they had made, and the bond that had grown between them. There was a weight to the question, a depth that mirrored the changes she was experiencing, both within herself and in the world around her. Serena stood before him, her feet sinking slightly into the warm sand, and she felt a sense of calm that she had never known before. The answer was simple yet profound. "It feels like I'm finally home," she said, her voice steady, but filled with an emotion she could barely put into words. Home, not just in the sense of the reef or the ocean, but in a deeper way. Home within herself, free of the constraints that had defined her for so long. She met Adrian's gaze, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude, love, and the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. Serena inhaled deeply, the salty tang of the ocean air filling her lungs, a sensation that felt both foreign and exhilarating after so many years of confinement. She stood with her eyes closed for a moment, letting the warmth of the sun soak into her skin, a gentle contrast to the coolness of the water that still clung to her. It was a new sensation, one she hadn't allowed herself to fully experience in centuries. The sunlight seemed to wrap around her like a soft embrace, as if the world itself was welcoming her into a future she had longed for but never dared to imagine. For the first time in so long, she felt truly free, her body alive with the energy of the earth and sea, no longer tethered by the weight of the curse. When she opened her eyes, the world seemed brighter, more vibrant. The familiar expanse of the ocean stretched out before her, but it was no longer a source of sorrow or a longing, it was a place of endless possibility. She turned to Adrian, her voice filled with wonder, unable to fully grasp the enormity of what had happened. "It feels incredible," she said, the words coming out in a soft, breathless whisper. There was an amazement in her tone, as if she were speaking not only about the freedom she had gained but also about the relief that washed over her, the realization that she could now exist on her own terms. It was a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to hope for, and yet here it was, unfolding around her. "I can't believe it's really over," Serena continued, her voice thick with emotion. She reached out to touch Adrian's arm, grounding herself in the reality of the moment. "The curse is gone," she said the words slowly, almost as if she were still coming to terms with the fact that the burden she had carried for so long was truly lifted. The weight that had defined her for centuries had vanished, leaving only the open horizon before her. It was a feeling of rebirth, of stepping into a world where she could finally make her own choices, free from the past that had bound her. As she looked at Adrian, the sense of gratitude and joy was overwhelming, knowing that this new beginning was not just hers alone, but theirs, shared together. Adrian's gaze softened as he watched Serena, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and tenderness. He had seen the weight of the curse on her for so long, the invisible chains that had bound her to the reef, and the sacrifices she had made for the greater good. Now, standing before him, she was no longer defined by that burden. She was, for the first time, truly free. He could see the change in her, the way the light seemed to shine brighter in her eyes, as if a veil had been lifted, allowing her to fully embrace the world around her. The thought of her now being able to live her life on her own terms filled him with a deep sense of peace. "You're free now, Serena," Adrian continued, his voice steady but full of emotion. He stepped closer, the words carrying the weight of everything they had fought for. "You can live your life however you choose. No more duties, no more sacrifices, just you." The thought of her being able to choose her own path, to walk through life without the heavy weight of responsibility bearing down on her, was something he never imagined would be possible. He had seen her give so much of herself to the reef, to the curse that had held her captive, and now she had a chance to reclaim her life, to shape it into something entirely her own. His words were simple, but they held a depth of meaning that Serena could feel in her very bones. Adrian had witnessed her struggles, the inner turmoil she had fought to keep hidden, and now, with the curse broken, she stood before him with a new freedom, a new lease on life. The possibility of choosing her own path, of forging a future without the looming shadow of the past, was a gift she hadn't allowed herself to dream of. As she looked back at Adrian, his unwavering support and love giving her the strength to face the unknown, she realized that the future, whatever it might hold, was no longer a burden. It was a new beginning, one they would face together. The words hit Serena with a mixture of joy and uncertainty, swirling in her mind like the currents of the sea she had once been bound to. She had dreamed of this day for so long, the day when the curse would finally be broken, when she could be free, unshackled by the ancient magic that had defined her existence. For years, her every thought and action had been consumed by her duty to the reef, her role as its protector. Now that the weight of that responsibility had lifted, she felt a rush of relief, but it was quickly followed by a wave of uncertainty. The world she had known was gone, and in its place was a vast, open horizon. She could feel the pull of endless possibility, but it was tempered by the fear of the unknown. She had spent so much time wondering what it would be like to have this freedom, imagining all the things she could do, the places she could see, and the life she could build for herself. Yet now, with the curse broken, Serena found herself hesitating. What would she do with this newfound freedom? For so long, her life had been defined by duty, by a singular purpose that had given her existence meaning, even as it had stripped her of so much else. Now, with that purpose no longer holding her in place, the idea of charting her own course felt both exhilarating and overwhelming. Her heart ached with the desire to find her own path, but there was a fear that lingered, a fear of choosing the wrong direction or being lost without the guiding force of the curse to keep her anchored. As she stood there, her thoughts swirling, Serena realized that the future was no longer something that had been dictated for her. It was something she could shape, something she could embrace fully. But with that realization came the weight of choice, choices she hadn't had to make in centuries. Where would she go? What would she do? The answers weren't clear, and for a moment, the vast expanse of the ocean before her seemed both infinite and intimidating. Yet, as she looked at Adrian, standing beside her with quiet understanding in his eyes, she felt a spark of hope. Perhaps, she thought, she didn't have to figure it all out alone. With him by her side, she could find her way, one step at a time. "Do you have any plans?" Adrian asked gently, his voice laced with both curiosity and understanding. He could see the conflict in Serena's eyes, the way her thoughts seemed to be pulled in every direction at once, unsure of where to go or what to do. For so long, she had been bound by duty, her life mapped out for her by the curse and the role she played in protecting the reef. But now that the chains had been broken, he could sense her hesitation, her uncertainty about what this newfound freedom truly meant. He didn't want to pressure her. He simply wanted to offer her a chance to talk, to let the weight of the question linger between them without expectations. Serena paused for a moment, her gaze drifting toward the horizon as though the answer might be waiting for her out there, beyond the vastness of the sea. Her heart was filled with a mix of emotions, relief at being free, excitement for the possibilities that lay ahead, but also a deep sense of apprehension. She had lived her life for so long with one clear purpose, one clear calling. Now, with the curse lifted, she was standing on the edge of something new, something she had never imagined would be hers. The idea of making plans, of choosing a future, felt both liberating and terrifying at the same time. "I don't know yet," Serena replied slowly, her voice soft but resolute. "I've never had the chance to think about what comes next. For so long, I didn't think I would ever have a choice." She turned to face him, her expression one of both vulnerability and hope. "But now, with the curse gone, I have to figure that out. I want to find a path that's mine to walk. I just don't know where it leads." She looked down at the sand for a moment, her fingers brushing over the grains. "But whatever it is, I know I want to take it with you, Adrian. I want to see what the future holds, together." Serena looked out at the ocean, her gaze distant as her mind wandered through a sea of conflicting thoughts. The gentle rhythm of the waves against the shore seemed to echo the tumult within her. For centuries, she had been bound to the reef, her every action dictated by a sacred duty to protect it. Now, with the curse broken, the weight of responsibility had lifted, but its absence left a hollow space inside her. She couldn't deny that the reef had been her purpose, the place where her identity had been forged. Yet, as the world around her unfolded in new possibilities, she felt an unfamiliar stirring, a longing for something more, something beyond the life she had known. "I'm not sure," she admitted, her voice tinged with both uncertainty and a hint of wonder. "I've spent so long protecting the reef, it's hard to imagine my life without that responsibility." She turned to Adrian, searching his eyes for understanding, as if she could find the answers to her unspoken questions there. "It was all I knew, all I ever did. But now, that's over. And even though it feels strange to let go of that part of me, I can't ignore the part of me that wants to explore, to see what's out there." She gestured toward the endless horizon, as though the world itself was calling to her. "There's so much I've never experienced, and now I can." The realization was both exhilarating and daunting. Serena's pulse quickened as she allowed herself to imagine a future without the endless cycle of duty, without the ever-present burden of the curse. The world, so vast and unknown, stretched out before her like a blank canvas, waiting to be filled with new adventures and discoveries. The thought of leaving the reef behind, of stepping away from the life she had always known, was a challenge. But it was also an opportunity, one that she could seize now, free from the constraints that had once defined her existence. She turned back to Adrian, her eyes alight with a newfound sense of possibility. "Now I can see the world, experience life as I've never been able to before." Her voice was filled with a quiet determination, as though the first step into that unknown future had already been taken. Adrian reached out, his fingers brushing gently against hers before his hand closed around hers, steady and reassuring. The warmth of his touch grounded her in that moment, offering both comfort and understanding. He could feel the quiet tremor of uncertainty running through her, the weight of the decision she faced pressing down on her shoulders. His voice was soft, but filled with conviction, as he spoke, trying to ease the burden of the unknown that lingered in her heart. "You don't have to decide everything right now," he said, his tone gentle yet firm, like a promise. "Take your time. The world is out there, waiting for you. And whatever you choose, I'll support you." Serena looked into his eyes, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to pause. His words wrapped around her like a protective embrace, providing a sense of peace she hadn't realized she needed. The fear that had been gnawing at the edges of her thoughts seemed to dissipate in the face of his unwavering belief in her. It was as if, with his words, Adrian was giving her permission to step into the world, to explore her own path, without the pressure of immediate answers. He was right. She didn't need to have everything figured out right away. For the first time in centuries, she had the luxury of time, of choice. She squeezed his hand in return, a quiet, grateful smile curving her lips. His support, his unwavering presence, meant more to her than she could express. It was no longer just about the reef or the curse. It was about the future they could build together, whatever shape that might take. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. In his presence, she felt braver, as if the vast world beyond the reef was no longer a source of fear, but a place of endless possibility. Whatever path she chose, with Adrian by her side, she knew she wouldn't be walking it alone. Serena smiled, her heart swelling with warmth at Adrian's words. There was something so deeply comforting in his presence, a steadiness that had anchored her during the most turbulent moments of their journey. He had always been there for her, first as an ally, then as a partner, and now, she realized, something more. Their connection, once built on shared struggle and sacrifice, had transformed into something deeper, something unspoken but undeniable. Each challenge they had faced together had only strengthened the bond between them, turning the impossible into something achievable, turning near survival into a deeper understanding of one another. As the curse that had bound her for so long finally lifted, Serena felt an unfamiliar lightness settle over her. The weight that had kept her tethered to the reef, the very thing that had defined her existence for centuries, was gone. With it, a flood of new possibilities washed over her, possibilities she had never dared to consider before. But it wasn't just about her newfound freedom. In the quiet moments, the ones that passed without words, she realized that the path ahead wasn't something she needed to walk alone. Adrian, who had stood by her side through every trial, was now more than just a companion. He was someone with whom she could imagine building a future, someone who had become as essential to her life as the very sea that had once claimed her. The weight of this realization was both exhilarating and humbling. With the curse broken and the magic of the ocean now restored, there was no longer any barrier between them. Serena's future was hers to shape, but she no longer had to face it alone. The world seemed vast, filled with unknowns, but for the first time, she felt ready to embrace it, not just for herself, but for the two of them. Together, they had already achieved the impossible, and now, whatever lay ahead, it felt like they could face it with the same strength and unity that had carried them through the darkest moments of their journey. "Thank you, Adrian," Serena said softly, her voice filled with gratitude as she squeezed his hand gently. The weight of her words was undeniable, a reflection of everything they had been through together. In that simple gesture, she poured all the emotions that had built up over the course of their journey: relief, admiration, and the deep, unspoken connection that had only grown stronger with time. Adrian had been her rock, her constant ally through every trial, and now, in this moment of newfound freedom, she was finally able to acknowledge just how much his presence had meant to her. Without him, none of this would have been possible. Adrian's eyes softened as he looked at her, his heart swelling with affection. He had always known Serena's strength, but over the course of their journey, he had come to admire her in ways he hadn't expected. She had been the one to protect the reef, to fight against the curse and the darkness that threatened it, but it was her unwavering spirit, her ability to push through even when it seemed impossible, that had truly captivated him. In her, he saw not just a fierce protector of the ocean, but a woman who had endured so much and yet still found the strength to fight for something greater. Her words, simple as they were, meant more to him than anything else. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the soft crash of the waves on the shore the only sound between them. It was as if the world had paused, allowing them a quiet space to reflect on everything that had led them to this moment. The reef was free, the curse was broken, and they had both sacrificed so much to restore the balance. But in that silence, Adrian realized something else. He had found something beyond just victory. He had found a deep, lasting bond with Serena, one that transcended their shared struggles. As the sun continued to rise higher in the sky, bathing the world in golden light, Adrian squeezed her hand in return, a silent promise that no matter where their paths led, he would always be there for her, just as she had been there for him. He smiled, his eyes filled with affection and warmth, as he looked at her. "You don't have to thank me, Serena," Adrian said, his voice steady but soft. His gaze lingered on her, filled with a tenderness that had grown deeper over the course of their journey. They had fought side by side, facing each trial, each challenge, as equals, two souls bound by a shared purpose. He had seen her at her strongest, at her most vulnerable, and through it all, his admiration for her had only grown. To him, their victory had never been about individual triumph, but about what they had built together. It was this bond, this partnership, that had carried them through the darkness, and now, it would guide them toward whatever the future held. Serena's heart swelled at his words, the sincerity in his voice wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. He had always been there, offering unwavering support, even when the path had been uncertain or treacherous. He never hesitated, never faltered, and that was something she had come to cherish deeply. "I know," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, her gaze meeting his with a look that spoke volumes. She had always known he was by her side, but hearing him say it now, acknowledging their shared strength, made her heart ache with a bittersweet joy. The weight of their sacrifices had been immense, yet in this moment, the promise of facing the future together made it all seem worthwhile. As the sound of the waves gently lapped against the shore, the world around them felt infinitely still, as though time had paused to allow them this moment of connection. The path ahead was still unknown, filled with both uncertainty and possibility, but standing here with Adrian, Serena felt a sense of peace settle over her. She no longer carried the burden of the curse, nor did she stand alone in facing the future. The road ahead was wide open, and with Adrian by her side she felt ready to walk it, wherever it might lead. Together they had broken the curse, restored the balance, and now they would face the unknown with hearts full of hope, and hands firmly clasped. The thought of facing the future alongside Adrian filled Serena with an overwhelming sense of hope. For so long, her existence had been defined by solitude, bound to the reef, her life tethered to a responsibility that left little room for anything else. She had been the protector of a realm she could never truly leave, isolated in her duty and in the curse that bound her to the depths. But now, with the weight of that curse lifted, she could finally breathe freely. She wasn't alone anymore. Adrian had become her constant, her partner, and more than that, he was her companion in this newfound freedom. The idea of exploring life beyond the reef, beyond the confines of her past, no longer seemed like an impossible dream. It was a reality, one that she could embrace. As she stood there, with the sea stretching out before her and Adrian beside her, the future no longer seemed daunting or uncertain. For so long, the thought of stepping into the unknown had been overwhelming, terrifying, even, but with Adrian by her side, the unknown had transformed into something exhilarating. There was a spark of adventure in the air, a sense of boundless possibility that Serena hadn't felt in centuries. The world that had once seemed distant and unreachable was now within her grasp, waiting for her to explore it, to experience it in ways she had never been able to before. The journey ahead felt like an open road, full of potential and promise, and with Adrian's unwavering presence beside her, she felt a surge of excitement that she hadn't expected. What once felt like a future clouded with uncertainty and fear now felt like a grand adventure, one she was more than ready to embark on. The idea of building a life, not defined by the reef or by the curse, but by the choices she made, was both liberating and thrilling. Serena could feel the pull of the world, the promise of new experiences, and the joy of discovering what lay beyond the horizon. And with Adrian there, their bond growing stronger with every passing day, she knew she wouldn't be facing it alone. Together, they would navigate the vastness of the world ahead, carving out a future that was all their own, filled with the kind of freedom and possibility Serena had always longed for. The words left Serena's lips with a certainty that surprised even her. She had spent so much of her life feeling alone, her existence defined by the reef and its endless demands. But now, standing on the shore with Adrian by her side, she felt an overwhelming sense of connection to him, a bond that had grown deeper with each challenge they had faced together. The thought of venturing into the unknown, of embracing the freedom she had fought for, was no longer a solitary endeavor. She couldn't imagine stepping into this new life without him. "Wherever I go," she said, her voice steady but filled with the spark of excitement that had been slowly growing in her heart, "I want you to be a part of it." The statement wasn't just a wish, it was a declaration, a promise that whatever came next, she wanted to face it with him, by his side. Adrian felt the weight of her words settle in his chest, a warmth spreading through him. Serena had always been someone who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, someone who had borne the burden of her role as protector for centuries. But in that moment, as she spoke to him, he realized just how much she had changed. The transformation wasn't just physical, from the sea-bound curse to her newfound freedom, but emotional as well. She was no longer the solitary guardian of the reef. She was someone who had learned to open her heart, to trust in others, and in him. Her words were a gift, a promise that their journey together had only just begun. He met her gaze, his eyes filled with a quiet affection. There was no question in his mind. He was in this with her, wherever they went. For Serena, the prospect of a shared future felt like a dream that was finally becoming real. She had never allowed herself to hope for this kind of connection, not in the way she had with Adrian. Their bond had started as necessity, forged in the fires of their struggle, but over time it had blossomed into something deeper, something enduring. Now, with the curse broken and the reef restored, there was no more reason to hold back. The future was theirs to shape, and for the first time in centuries, Serena was free to choose it. To choose him. The thought of experiencing the world beyond the reef, of building a life filled with new memories and adventures, felt both thrilling and comforting. And in that moment, with Adrian's steady presence beside her, Serena knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, united in a bond that was stronger than any curse or uncertainty. Adrian's smile deepened, his eyes sparkling with a mixture of affection and unwavering resolve. The words Serena had spoken touched something deep within him, a reminder of just how far they had come together. What had begun as a shared purpose to break a curse had blossomed into something far more profound. In the past, he had been content with the freedom of the open sea, his ship his only companion. But now, as he stood on the shore beside Serena, he realized that the adventure he had longed for was no longer about the endless horizon or the call of the wind. It was about the connection they had forged. The thought of facing the unknown alongside her filled him with a sense of purpose and certainty. He had come to care for her in ways he hadn't expected, and the idea of exploring the world together, of sharing in the joys and challenges that lay ahead, was all he needed to feel complete. "I wouldn't have it any other way," he said, his voice steady with the weight of his conviction. There was no hesitation in his words, no doubt lingering in the quiet between them. Adrian had spent years navigating the unpredictable waters of the sea, always seeking the next great adventure, but it was in Serena's presence that he had found something far more meaningful than anything he could have imagined. Their bond had been tested and tempered by fire, forged in the crucible of their shared trials. From the first moment they had met, they had been pushed to the limits of their endurance, yet every challenge had only served to draw them closer. He had come to realize that this was the true adventure. Being with Serena, facing the world with her by his side, was the greatest journey he could ever embark on. And as they stood there, hand in hand, with the sun warming the horizon, Adrian knew that whatever awaited them, they would face it together. Serena could see the certainty in Adrian's expression, the quiet strength in his voice, and it filled her with an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had feared, at times, that her freedom might be a burden, that the world she was about to step into would feel foreign and empty. But with Adrian's words, with his unwavering support, she realized that she was not stepping into it alone. She had someone by her side, someone who understood her in ways no one else ever could. His promise, as simple as it was, meant everything. It was the anchor she hadn't known she needed, grounding her as she faced the vast unknown ahead. Together, they would navigate whatever came next, and for the first time in her life, Serena felt a deep sense of peace. With Adrian's unwavering presence beside her, the future no longer felt daunting. It felt like a shared adventure waiting to unfold. They stood side by side on the shore, their feet sinking into the soft sand as the gentle waves lapped at their ankles. The sun hung high in the sky, its rays warm and golden, casting a soft glow across the horizon. The sound of the ocean, once a source of uncertainty and danger, now felt like a lullaby, its rhythm soothing and familiar. Around them, the world seemed to hum with life and possibility, every element in perfect harmony. The Heartstone's magic still pulsed softly beneath the water, a quiet reminder of the journey they had undertaken and the sacrifices they had made. The reef, once shrouded in darkness, now thrived under the protection of their shared efforts, its waters clear and vibrant, teeming with life. The weight of the curse had been lifted, and with it, the burden that had defined Serena for so long. For the first time in ages, there was no shadow looming over her, no unfulfilled duty to tie her to the past. It was a moment of pure relief, a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for centuries. Serena's heart swelled with a deep sense of peace, a stillness she hadn't known in years. The relentless responsibility of guarding the reef, of maintaining the delicate balance between the magic of the sea and the world above, had defined her existence for so long. But now, as she stood there, the future stretched before her like a vast, uncharted sea, full of endless potential. There were no longer any invisible chains holding her to the water's depths, no magic dictating her every action. She was free, not just from the curse, but from the role she had been forced into. She could finally live her life on her own terms. The thought was both exhilarating and overwhelming, but most of all, it was liberating. No longer did she have to fear the unknown, for it was hers to explore. The world was wide and waiting, full of experiences she had only dreamed of during her years of isolation. Looking out over the ocean, Serena felt a quiet certainty settle in her chest. The future was not a mystery she had to solve, it was a promise. And as she turned her gaze toward Adrian, standing next to her, she knew she was no longer alone in facing it. Their bond, forged in the heat of their shared struggles, was stronger than anything the world could throw at them. Together, they had faced the darkness, and together, they would step into the light. She had found something she never expected, a partner, a companion, someone who would stand by her no matter what the world had in store. The sun shone brighter in that moment, not just overhead but within her, filling her with a hope and determination she had never known before. With Adrian by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next, and she no longer feared the uncertainty of the future. As they strolled along the beach, the soft sand giving way beneath their feet, the world around them felt expansive, brimming with the promise of new beginnings. The sky stretched out in an endless expanse of blue, and the sound of the waves crashing gently against the shore seemed to carry away the weight of the years that had come before. Each step they took, side by side, felt like a step towards something greater, something unknown but full of potential. The air was thick with possibility, as though the very land beneath their feet was alive with the energy of change. Serena could feel the tide of her own emotions shifting, a sense of liberation swelling within her with every passing moment. For so long, she had been defined by her duty to the reef, by the curse that had tethered her to the ocean and its secrets. But now, as she walked alongside Adrian, her heart light and unburdened, she realized that the future was hers to shape. With every step, Serena could feel herself shedding the remnants of the past, the invisible chains that had once anchored her to the depths. The fear of what lay ahead, the uncertainty that had always followed her like a shadow, was beginning to fade. She was free from the obligations that had governed her life for centuries, free from the weight of a responsibility that had never truly been her choice. The past no longer had a hold on her, and she was ready to embrace whatever came next with open arms. The horizon before them seemed infinite, the possibilities stretching as far as her imagination could reach. No longer constrained by the boundaries of the reef, Serena was filled with a quiet sense of confidence, the kind that comes from knowing you are in control of your own destiny. The road ahead was unwritten, but that was no longer a source of fear. Instead, it was a thrilling adventure waiting to unfold. As they continued walking, hand in hand, Serena looked at Adrian, the one person who had stood by her through every trial, every challenge. His presence at her side, steadfast and unwavering, gave her the strength to face the future without hesitation. She knew that, together, they could face whatever the world had in store for them. No longer was she the solitary guardian of the reef, bound to its fate by a curse. Now she was a woman with a future to build, and she was ready to embrace it with everything she had. The bond they shared was unbreakable, forged through their shared struggles and triumphs. Serena felt a deep sense of peace in that certainty. No matter where their journey took them, no matter the twists and turns the future held, she was ready. And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm golden light over the beach, Serena realized that the world had never felt so wide, so full of promise. A new beginning stretched before Serena, a vast, uncharted horizon brimming with possibilities. The weight of the past, of the curse and the duty that had once defined her, had been lifted. What remained was an open road, and Serena felt an exhilarating rush of freedom. It was a rare gift, the chance to start fresh, and she understood now more than ever that she was ready. The past had shaped her into who she was, but it would no longer dictate the course of her life. With every breath she took, she could feel herself stepping into this new chapter, each moment one of growth and change. The world was no longer a place of boundaries and constraints. It was a landscape of potential, just waiting to be explored. As she turned to Adrian, her heart swelled with gratitude and a quiet joy. Their bond had been forged in the crucible of hardship, but now it was something deeper, something unshakable. Adrian, her ally, her partner, had been with her through every trial, every fear, and every sacrifice. Together, they had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, and now, they stood side by side on the cusp of a brighter future. Serena knew that whatever lay ahead, she would never have to face it alone. Adrian was by her side, and together they would build a life based on the choices they made, not the obligations that once bound them. The promise of this shared future filled her with warmth and excitement, a feeling she had never known before. With the weight of the past behind them, the future now shimmered with endless possibilities. There were still unknowns, still questions about what this new life would look like, but Serena felt ready to embrace the adventure. The freedom she now had was not just the absence of the curse. It was the freedom to choose, to explore, to live without the constraints of the life she had once known. As the sun continued to set, casting its golden hues across the horizon, Serena felt a sense of peace wash over her. This was the beginning of something extraordinary, something that would be shaped by their shared dreams, their love, and the strength they had discovered in each other. And with that, she was ready. Chapter 40. Embracing the Future. The sun sank lower into the sky, casting a rich, amber glow across the calm waters of the reef. The fading light painted the ocean in hues of gold and deep orange, reflecting off the smooth surface like liquid fire. The day had passed slowly, a time for quiet reflection and the soft reverence that follows profound change. After the weight of the ritual, the lifting of the curse, and the promise of a new life, the world around them seemed to breathe with a gentleness that matched their hearts. The once turbulent sea now stretched before them in peaceful stillness, as if the entire world had paused to give them space to absorb the magnitude of what had just unfolded. As twilight settled softly over the water, Adrian and Serena stood side by side, their hands naturally finding each other's. They gazed out at the vast, endless horizon, where the ocean met the sky in a seamless blur of colors. There were no words between them, only the shared quiet of the moment, a silent understanding that the world had changed, and so had they. The future lay before them, uncertain yet filled with promise, and for the first time in a long while, both felt the weight of the past lifting. Together, they had faced the storm, and now they were free to walk forward, wherever that journey might lead. The sea, once a source of endless challenge, now seemed to promise adventure, a new chapter, and the chance to write their own story. The reef, once darkened by the weight of an ancient curse, now shimmered with renewed vitality, its once muted colors bursting into life. Coral, vibrant in shades of pink, orange, and lavender, stood tall and proud, reaching for the sun-dappled surface above. Schools of fish glided effortlessly through the crystal-clear waters, their scales catching the light and flashing like sparks of color against the backdrop of the deep blue. The water, once murky and tainted, was now a brilliant, transparent turquoise, reflecting the endless sky above. Every inch of the reef seemed to pulse with energy, a living testament to the restoration they had fought so hard for. At the heart of it all, the heartstone pulsed steadily, its soft glow a constant reminder of the power they had harnessed and the balance they had restored. Its light was no longer a sign of captivity or darkness, but a beacon of hope and renewal, anchoring the reef in its newfound harmony. The stone's energy radiated outward, infusing the waters with peace and stability, while the life that surrounded it thrived in abundance. For the first time in centuries, the reef was free to flourish, its vibrant ecosystem flourishing without the shadow of the curse looming over it. And as the currents gently shifted through the coral, it was clear that this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with life, hope, and endless possibility. But tonight their thoughts were not consumed by the burdens of the past or the immense victory they had secured. The weight of centuries of darkness had been lifted, but they didn't linger on that triumph. Instead, their minds were fixed on the vast, open future ahead of them. A future that, for the first time, was no longer governed by the constraints of ancient curses or the heavy mantle of duty that had defined so much of their lives. Tonight, it was the promise of freedom that filled the air, freedom to decide, to choose, to dream. They stood together, side by side, contemplating the endless possibilities that lay before them. No longer bound by the sacrifices they had once made, the world was now open to them in ways they hadn't even allowed themselves to imagine. It was a future that was theirs to shape, not defined by any past obligation or shadow, but by the decisions they would make together. For the first time, they were free to carve their own path, one that was filled with hope, adventure, and the deep connection they had forged in the fires of their shared journey. And as they looked toward that horizon, there was only one certainty in their hearts. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Adrian stole a glance at Serena, his gaze lingering on her as the last rays of the setting sun bathed her face in a warm, golden light. The shadows of the day stretched long across the water, but it was the serenity in her features that captivated him. There was a softness there, a peacefulness that seemed to settle over her like a gentle tide. The weight of centuries of sacrifice, of duty, had lifted from her shoulders, leaving her with a calmness he had never seen before. It was as though the very essence of who she was had been set free, her heart unburdened at last. The transformation in Serena wasn't just physical, it radiated from within her, from the depth of her spirit. She was no longer tied to the reef by the curse, no longer bound by the heavy responsibilities that had once shaped every aspect of her life. With that newfound freedom, the world around them seemed to shift, expanding into a realm of endless possibilities. No longer confined by duty, she was free to explore her desires, to shape her own path. And in that moment, as the sun dipped lower, Adrian knew that whatever the future held, it would be filled with choices they would make together, side by side. Serena turned her gaze toward the horizon, her eyes tracing the edge where the sea met the sky. The expanse before her was vast, an endless stretch of water shimmering in the fading light. She took in the beauty of it, the way the waves rolled gently in, catching the amber glow of the setting sun, and felt a quiet awe wash over her. There was so much she had never seen, so much she had never experienced, all hidden beyond the familiar waters of the reef. She could feel the pull of that unknown, that beckoning sense of adventure that had been suppressed for so long by the weight of her curse. For the first time in centuries, she was free to look out at the world without the burden of responsibility anchoring her to one place. The horizon seemed infinite, full of opportunities and promises, waiting for her to take the first step. But as she stood there, contemplating all the possibilities, a part of her still lingered in the past, tethered to the reef, to the life she had known and the sacrifices she had made. What would it mean to leave all of that behind? Could she really walk away from the place that had been her home for so long, the place she had fought to protect? Adrian's voice brought her back to the present, his question simple but weighted with meaning. "What do you see when you look out there?" She glanced at him then, meeting his gaze with a small, reflective smile. She realized that the answer was not just about the world that lay beyond the water, but about the future they could build together, wherever that might take them. The possibilities were endless, and for the first time, she felt ready to face them, no longer as a prisoner to her past, but as someone who could choose her own destiny. Serena's eyes remained fixed on the horizon, the endless expanse of water stretching before her like a promise. The colors of twilight melted together, golden hues fading into soft purples and deep blues, as if the sea and sky were conspiring to create a canvas of infinite possibility. "I see a world full of wonder," she said softly, her voice carrying a reverence that matched the beauty before them. Each word was laden with emotion, a quiet acknowledgement of how much she had longed for this freedom. So much I've never experienced, so many places I've only dreamed of. And now I can explore them, without fear, without the weight of the curse holding me back. Her thoughts drifted to the years she had spent tethered to the reef, her life defined by duty and sacrifice. She had protected this place with everything she had, enduring centuries of isolation and longing, her dreams of the world beyond reduced to fleeting imaginings. Now, the curse was gone, and with it, the invisible chains that had bound her to the reef. A spark of excitement flickered in her chest at the thought of stepping into the unknown. The idea of walking on foreign shores, seeing unfamiliar skies, and experiencing life in its fullness was no longer an unreachable fantasy. It was a tangible reality, waiting for her to claim it. She turned to Adrian, her expression a mixture of wonder and determination. "There's so much to discover," she continued, her voice steadier now, filled with the kind of hope she hadn't dared to feel before. "For the first time, the horizon doesn't feel like a boundary. It feels like an invitation." Her words hung in the air between them, the weight of her newfound freedom mingling with the anticipation of the journey ahead. In her heart, she knew that whatever lay beyond that line where the sky met the sea, she wouldn't face it alone. Adrian nodded, his gaze shifting to the horizon Serena had been so transfixed by moments before. He understood the weight of her words, the profound liberation they carried. Her dreams of freedom mirrored something deep within him, a longing he hadn't realized he shared until now. For years, his life had been defined by duty as much as hers had, though of a different kind. His pursuit of treasure, and his unwavering responsibility to his crew had consumed him, leaving little room for self-discovery or thoughts of a life beyond the sea. Yet, as he stood here beside Serena, he felt a shift within himself, as though the tides were finally turning. The curse's end marked more than just the salvation of the reef. It signaled the close of a chapter in both their lives. Adrian couldn't deny the bittersweet ache of leaving behind the world he had known, a life of adventure, of navigating treacherous waters and chasing elusive dreams. But now, for the first time, the idea of stepping into the unknown didn't carry the weight of obligation. It carried the thrill of possibility. A future untethered by the past awaited him, and he wasn't afraid to face it. Not anymore. "You're right," he murmured, almost to himself. "The horizon feels different now, like a door that's finally open." Turning back to Serena, he saw the reflection of his own hope shining in her eyes. It wasn't just the allure of freedom that stirred him, but the knowledge that they would face this uncharted future together. The bond forged between them in the crucible of their shared trials felt unbreakable, a foundation upon which they could build something new. For the first time in his life, Adrian felt as though the choices before him weren't a burden but a gift. Whatever lay ahead, he was ready to embrace it, with Serena by his side. "Where do you want to go first?" Adrian asked, his tone warm and filled with genuine curiosity. He turned his gaze to Serena, watching as a thoughtful expression flickered across her face. She tilted her head slightly, her silver hair catching the last rays of the setting sun, and a smile began to form on her lips. He could see the possibilities forming in her mind, the vastness of the world finally within her reach. It wasn't just a question of where she wanted to go. It was the realization that she could go anywhere, unbound by the limitations that had defined her existence for so long. Serena's eyes drifted back to the horizon, her smile growing. "Everywhere," she said softly, her voice brimming with wonder. "I want to see it all, the bustling cities, the quiet forests, the mountains that stretch into the clouds. I've spent so much of my life tethered to this reef, dreaming of what lay beyond it. Now, I don't have to imagine anymore." She glanced at him, a playful glint in her gaze. "I want to start with the places I've heard stories about, the ones that felt like distant fairy tales. And I want to see them not just with my eyes, but with you by my side." Her words struck a chord in Adrian, filling him with a quiet sense of awe. He had traveled the seas for years, seen countless shores and distant lands, but hearing her speak of exploration so fervently reminded him of the magic he had forgotten existed in the journey itself. For Serena, The world wasn't just a map of destinations, it was an unfolding adventure, a canvas waiting to be painted with her newfound freedom. "Then everywhere it is," he said, his voice resolute yet light. "We'll make those dreams real, one step at a time." He reached for her hand, his fingers curling gently around hers, and together they stood, looking out at the horizon that promised so much more than either of them could have ever imagined. Serena turned to him, her silver hair catching the soft hues of twilight, her eyes alight with a brightness Adrian hadn't seen before. "Everywhere," she said, her voice carrying a spark of uncontainable excitement. A smile broke across her face, transforming her usually composed demeanor into something radiant and alive. "There's so much to see, to explore. Places I've only dreamed about, stories I've only heard in passing. Now I can finally go and see them for myself." Her words spilled forth with a mix of awe and determination, as though the weight of her newfound freedom was finally sinking in. Adrian felt his chest tighten at the sight of her. She wasn't just excited, she was liberated. The burdens that had once held her back were gone, leaving behind someone who was ready to embrace the world with open arms. He couldn't help but smile in return, her enthusiasm as infectious as the sunrise after a long, stormy night. "You've spent so long protecting this place, Serena. You've earned the right to see what lies beyond it," he said softly. His gaze lingered on hers, steady and full of warmth. "And I'll be right there with you, every step of the way." Serena's expression softened, her excitement mingling with something deeper. "More than anything," she continued, her voice quieter but no less heartfelt, "I want to do it with you." She reached for his hand, her fingers curling around his as if grounding herself in the moment. "It wouldn't feel the same without you by my side." The sincerity in her tone was undeniable, and Adrian felt his resolve strengthen. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, not as individuals bound by duty or circumstance, but as partners ready to carve out a future of their own making. Her words sent a warm surge of emotion through Adrian, anchoring him in the present, while his mind flickered through the memories of their journey. They had faced countless dangers together, treacherous seas, ancient curses, and moments where the odds of survival seemed non-existent. Each trial had tested them, pushing them to their limits, but it had also drawn them closer, revealing the strength of their partnership. It wasn't just camaraderie or shared purpose that had bound them, it was something deeper, something unspoken yet undeniable. Standing beside her now, Adrian felt the weight of everything they had overcome, and the bond that had grown stronger with every storm they weathered. He glanced at Serena, her gaze fixed on the horizon, her expression filled with quiet determination. She had been a force of nature, unyielding, resilient, and fiercely protective of what she loved. And yet, in the moments they had shared, he had also seen her vulnerability, her capacity for hope, and her unwavering courage. Those glimpses had etched themselves into his heart, making it clear that their connection was unlike anything he had known before. It wasn't just a partnership born of necessity. It was something rare and precious, a bond forged in the fires of adversity that had become unbreakable. As the soft sound of the waves filled the air around them, Adrian felt a certainty settle in his chest. Whatever the future held, it was something they would face together. Their journey had taught him that some things were worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, and this, what they had, was one of them. He reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers, grounding himself in the moment. "We've come so far," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of all that remained unspoken. "And wherever we go from here, I know it'll be worth it, because we'll be facing it together." Adrian's words carried a quiet sincerity that resonated deeply with Serena, his voice soft yet unwavering in its conviction. She turned to look at him, her heart swelling as his expression reflected a vulnerability she had rarely seen. His life, once defined by the endless pursuit of treasure and fleeting glories, had been transformed by their journey together. Now, standing here on the shore, he was no longer the man who had arrived seeking riches. He was someone who had discovered the value of connection, of purpose beyond himself. The weight of his admission lingered in the air, grounding the moment in an unshakable truth. "You've changed me too," Serena said, her voice barely above a whisper as she met his gaze. "I spent so long believing that my life was only about duty, about protecting the reef at any cost. But you've shown me that there's more. That I can choose my own path, and that I don't have to face it alone." Her words hung between them, carrying the unspoken acknowledgement of how much they had grown, not just as individuals, but together. It wasn't just about the adventures that lay ahead or the challenges they had overcome. It was about the bond that had carried them through, giving them the strength to envision a brighter future. Adrian's hand reached for hers, his grip firm yet gentle, as if to anchor them both in the moment. "We've both spent so much time tied to things we thought defined us," he said, his tone tinged with a bittersweet understanding. "But now, we get to decide what matters. And for me, it's this, being with you. Building something real, something that lasts." His voice softened at the last words, but the depth of his meaning was undeniable. Together, they stood at the edge of an unknown future, not as individuals chasing separate destinies, but as partners, ready to face the world side by side. Serena's hand clasped Adrian's, the warmth of his touch grounding her in the present, a tangible reminder of the journey that had brought them here. For so long, her life had been defined by the shadow of the curse and the unrelenting demands of her duty. But now, as her fingers intertwined with his, she felt a profound sense of connection, not just to him, but to the life that lay ahead. "We've both been given a second chance," she said, her voice steady and resolute, carrying the weight of their shared struggles and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Her gaze lingered on his face, taking in the strength and vulnerability that made Adrian who he was. She saw in him the same determination that had carried them through their darkest moments, and the same hope that now fueled her own dreams. "To live, to love, to build a future that's ours," she continued, her words brimming with quiet conviction. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about seizing the opportunity to create a life free of the chains that had bound them for so long. Her heart swelled with the knowledge that they had fought for this freedom, together, and she was determined not to let it slip away. Adrian's fingers tightened around hers, his expression softening as he nodded. "Neither do I," he said simply, his voice carrying the same quiet intensity. His presence was a constant source of strength, and the bond they had forged felt unbreakable. Together, they had faced trials that tested their limits, but now they stood on the precipice of something new. As they looked out toward the horizon, the unspoken agreement between them was clear. They would not waste this chance. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them hand in hand, ready to shape a future defined not by fear or obligation, but by love and possibility. Adrian's chest tightened with a wave of emotion as he met Serena's steady gaze. For much of his life, he had been driven by a restless pursuit of adventure, of treasures hidden in the farthest corners of the world. He had prided himself on his ability to seize what he wanted without hesitation, forging ahead without regret. But standing here now, he felt something shift within him. The treasures he had once sought seemed hollow compared to what he had found in Serena. She wasn't a conquest or a fleeting desire. She was his anchor, the person who made him see life in a way he never had before. As he looked at her, illuminated by the warm glow of the setting sun, he felt a certainty he had rarely known. For all the maps he had studied and voyages he had undertaken, none of them could have led him to this moment. The realization hit him like a rising tide. The life he wanted wasn't tied to a ship or a distant horizon. It was here, standing beside him, embodied in the woman who had shown him that true strength wasn't about chasing the next adventure but about choosing to stay and build something meaningful. She had redefined what treasure meant to him, and he couldn't imagine facing the future without her. Adrian's hand brushed against hers, the simple gesture carrying the weight of his newfound clarity. "I never thought I'd find something like this," he admitted softly, his voice rough with emotion. "I've spent my life chasing things I thought would make me whole, but none of it ever did. You've changed that, Serena. You've shown me what it means to truly live, and now, I want to spend the rest of my days living that life with you." Adrian's smile deepened, a quiet confidence radiating from him as he spoke. "Then let's not waste a moment," he said, his voice steady with resolve. The wind carried his words across the gentle waves, as if the sea itself bore witness to their shared promise. His eyes, warm and unwavering, met Serena's, and for a moment, the enormity of what they had overcome hung in the air between them. They had faced curses, storms, and dangers that would have broken others, yet here they stood, stronger for it. His words weren't just a declaration, they were a commitment, a vow to embrace whatever lay ahead. Serena felt her heart swell at his words, a rush of excitement mingling with the quiet strength of their bond. The idea of venturing into the unknown, no longer bound by fear or duty, filled her with a sense of wonder she hadn't felt in centuries. "The world is out there, waiting for us," he had said, and she believed him with every fiber of her being. The horizon stretched before them like an open canvas, the possibilities endless. They had earned this chance, this freedom, and she was determined to savor every moment of it by his side. Her fingers tightened around his, a silent acknowledgement of the partnership they had forged. The setting sun bathed them in a golden glow, its light a reminder of the new beginning they were stepping into. As they stood together, their hands entwined, Serena felt a deep sense of peace and anticipation. "Whatever it holds," Adrian had said, "we'll face it together." And she knew they would. The challenges ahead didn't daunt her. They only made the future more thrilling. With Adrian beside her, she felt invincible, ready to turn the dreams that had once seemed so distant into a reality. Together, they would write a new chapter, one filled with adventure, discovery, and the kind of love that could weather any storm. Serena smiled, the expression soft and genuine as a profound sense of contentment washed over her. The vastness of the horizon mirrored the possibilities that now stretched before her, a future unbound by the chains of the past. The thought of writing this new chapter alongside Adrian filled her heart with a quiet joy. Their journey had been fraught with peril and sacrifice, yet here they were, standing on the cusp of something extraordinary. For the first time in centuries, she felt truly free to shape her destiny, not alone but with someone who understood her heart as deeply as Adrian did. The future felt like an open book, its pages blank and waiting to be filled. Serena could almost picture the stories they would create together, exploring distant lands, uncovering hidden wonders, and savoring the simple moments that would weave their lives together. There would be laughter, born of shared adventures and whispered secrets, and love, the steady anchor in a world of endless change. The possibilities seemed limitless, each one brighter and more vivid with Adrian by her side. He wasn't just a companion for the journey, he was the reason she looked forward to the road ahead. As the last light of the setting sun danced across the waves, Serena felt a surge of gratitude for everything that had brought them to this moment. The trials they had faced had shaped them, but they no longer defined them. Together, they could craft a story that was entirely their own, a life not just of surviving but of truly living. She glanced at Adrian, his presence steady and reassuring, and knew with unwavering certainty that whatever lay ahead, they would embrace it hand in hand, ready to fill each page with adventures, with laughter, and with a love that would endure. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in soft hues of twilight, a sense of quiet peace settled over the landscape. The fading light turned the sky into a tapestry of rich purples and oranges, while the calm waves whispered their own ancient secrets. Adrian and Serena stood side by side for a moment, taking in the beauty of the scene around them, before they turned away from the reef. Hand in hand, they walked away from the place that had once held them both captive, a place now imbued with the memories of their shared struggles and victories. With each step, they felt the weight of their past lift, replaced by the anticipation of what lay ahead. The air around them felt lighter, freer, as if the very land itself was welcoming them into this new chapter. The burdens of the curse and the responsibility that had bound them to the reef were no more. The oppressive weight that had shaped their every decision was gone, leaving them with a rare and beautiful opportunity, the chance to define their future, unencumbered by the shadows of what had come before. Serena, once trapped in a life defined by duty and sacrifice, now felt the thrill of possibility coursing through her veins. And Adrian, freed from the call of treasure and the weight of his own expectations, found himself imagining a life he never thought he could have, a life of choice, of shared experiences, and of love. They walked together, each step a declaration of the new path they would carve out for themselves. The horizon before them, once distant and uncertain, now seemed full of promise. The road ahead would not always be easy, and challenges would inevitably arise, but for the first time in a long while, they felt equipped to face whatever came next. Their journey was no longer defined by the past, but by the future they would create together, two souls bound not by circumstance, but by a love that had been tested and had triumphed. Hand in hand they moved forward, ready to embrace whatever adventures lay ahead, knowing that together they could conquer anything. The sea stretched out before them, an endless expanse of shimmering blue that seemed to hold infinite possibilities. The gentle rhythm of the waves lapping against the shore echoed in the stillness of the evening, a soft reminder of the vastness of the world and all it had to offer. As they walked along the sand, their footsteps left a trail behind them, soon to be washed away by the tide. But in that fleeting moment, their marks were left on the earth, an emblem of the new beginning they were stepping into together. Each step they took was a declaration of freedom, of a life unbound by the past, and of the future they would now create side by side. The air was thick with the scent of salt water and the promise of adventure, and Serena felt a surge of excitement she hadn't known in centuries. For so long, she had been confined to a singular existence, bound by duty and the weight of her curse. But now, with the horizon before her, she realized just how much she had missed, how much there was still to see, to learn, and to experience. And with Adrian beside her, the world felt open, its mysteries ready to be discovered. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew they would face them together, their bond a source of unwavering strength. Adrian glanced at Serena, his heart swelling with both love and anticipation. The road ahead was uncertain, but with her by his side, it felt less daunting. The thrill of the unknown was no longer something to fear, but something to embrace. They had both been freed from the chains of their pasts, and now, with each step along the shore, they could feel the weight lifting from their shoulders. Their journey, one that had already been filled with so much pain and triumph, was now entering a new chapter. It was a chapter of choice, of freedom, and of a future they would build together, no longer held back by the things that had once defined them. The world was theirs to explore, and together they would make it their own. As they walked further from the shore, the night air grew cooler, carrying with it the distant scent of salt and the promise of new beginnings. The sound of the waves gently lapping against the sand was a comforting, rhythmic pulse, like a lullaby for the earth itself. Behind them, the reef lay in peaceful silence, its vibrant coral and the heart stone soft, pulsing light now bathed in the glow of twilight. The once cursed waters, which had held such weight and danger, now felt transformed, a symbol of the balance and freedom they had restored. The past was no longer a chain, and the future stretched out before them, full of promise. Serena's heart quickened with each step, the sense of possibility growing stronger the further they walked from the reef. The darkness of the night felt full of potential, and though she had spent so much of her life tied to the sea and its mysteries, the open road ahead was now where she could truly make her mark. No longer held back by the shadow of the curse, she was free to choose her own path. With Adrian beside her, her confidant and her equal, she felt ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing they would face it together. The challenges that had once loomed so large now felt surmountable, and the dreams that had once seemed impossible began to take shape. The future awaited them, bright and boundless, calling to them with its promises of adventure and discovery. There was no destination in mind, no fixed plan. They were no longer constrained by the need to protect or to serve, but free to live on their own terms. The road ahead might be uncertain, but it was theirs to explore, and as they disappeared into the night, the weight of the past lifted entirely. The Heartstone's light flickered gently in the distance, casting a final glow over the shore, a beacon of hope and a reminder of the journey that had brought them to this moment. Together, they stepped into the unknown, hearts full of hope, ready to create their own future.